Chapter 426. The Wang Ting you're talking about is my disciple. When digging spiritual plants like the snow jade tree, the best equipment to use was a shovel made from jade. After digging the plant out, one should seal it immediately in a box. Wang Ting didn't prepare any of this. However, it didn't mean that Qiu Bo didn't. He came prepared. Wang Ting found these items in his space ring just now. At that time, he didn't find it strange. After all, he wasn't an ignorant person. However, Qiu Bo was a layman. He didn't know having the jade box wasn't enough. The natural jade would only keep 70 to 80% of the tree's vital energy. To ensure that none of its vital energy would get lost, you needed to carve some sealing runes on the box. Wang Ting didn't waste any time. After taking out the jade box, he used his spiritual power to quickly carve some runes on the surface. Everything was done smoothly. Within a few minutes, numerous runes appeared on the box. Perfect. Wang Ting smiled. He gave himself a thumbs up. Then, he took out the jade shovel and loosened the soil around the snow jade tree. He dug around the edges before inching his way around. With a quick scan of his surroundings and ensuring no treasures were left, he departed instantly. After he leaped out from the lake, he saw that Qiu Bo was still unconscious. He sat down cross-legged beside Qiu Bo and decided to wait and see if another round of attribute bubbles would appear on the surface of the lake. After all, the water force in this area was dense. Wang Ting didn't want to give them up. Since he had nothing to do, he took out the corpse of the black armor giant crocodile and investigated it with his spiritual sight. Suddenly, he saw 3 bright green balls in its body. 3 light balls. Wang Ting was dumbstruck. Then, he almost jumped in excitement. He hurriedly used his spiritual power to cut the corpse of the black armor giant crocodile and take out the 3 items. Besides the star core, there was also a star bone. The star core of a half-step Lord-level star beast was priceless. Most importantly, it was rare. As for the star bone, compared to the star core, it was even harder to find. Wang Ting was thrilled. He examined the 2 star bones in his hand. Yes, he took out 2, not 1, star bones from the body of the black armor giant crocodile. Both were 4-paw bones. It was uncommon to find 2 star bones on a single star beast. He studied the patterns on the star bones and was inspired. He instilled water force into the star bones. Instantly, the star bones started shining with blue light. His hand started to feel heavy. It's a strength-type star bone. Wang Ting was stunned. It was a good item for him. Based on his skill as an advanced stage blacksmith, he felt that this pair of star bones could be forged into a pair of strength-type boxing gloves. The previous boxing gloves he had weren't suitable for him anymore. He was a 7-star soldier-level martial warrior now, so if he used his full power, the boxing gloves would disintegrate. I'll go back, find some good ingredients, and make it myself. Wang Ting thought to himself. He took out the other star beasts from the space ring and scanned them with his spiritual sight. He instantly found a few more star cores. No more star bones appeared, though. It looked like star bones were scarce even among advanced rank star beasts. Wang Ting sized up the 6 star cores in front of him. 2 of them were fire element star cores. He already had a plan on how to utilize them. He used his spiritual pet contract to call Little White over. The spirit flame ghost crow had always been following him. When he didn't need it, it would hunt freely. After some time, a black figure plummeted down from the sky. Little White was a 3-star star beast now, so it was getting larger. Wang Ting allowed it to roam freely. As a result, Little White was able to unleash its natural instincts. Its combat ability was not bad. However, Wang Ting noticed that it would be injured after it flew back. It looked like it kept fighting with other star beasts outside. This showed that its combat ability was improved through hard work and experience. Wang Ting had ample healing medicine, and he was never stingy towards his spiritual pet. His healing medicine was better than the ones used by Han Zhu and Wan Baiqiu. Han Zhu and Wan Baiqiu were elated when they received his dance, but they didn't know that a crow had better treatment than them. Little White regained its health quickly after eating his dance. In this aspect, it had an advantage over the other star beasts in the wild, so it improved tremendously. This made Wang Ting extremely satisfied. He was improving quickly and coming close to the general stage. As his spiritual pet, it would be embarrassing if it was too weak. At this moment, Little White landed in front of Wang Ting and cawed at him in confusion. "I have something good for you." Wang Ting smiled. He lifted his hand that was holding the 2-star cores and threw one of them directly to Little White. He wasn't being petty. These 2-star cores came from a 4-star star beast and a 5-star star beast, respectively. The force contained in them was powerful, so Little White might not be able to digest it with its current ability. Little White felt the thick fire force within the star core. Its eyes lit up, and it cawed happily. It bit the star core with its beak and swallowed it whole. Instantly, a fiery red glow appeared in its eyes. Even its body was engulfed in flames. It looked handsome and magnificent. Wang Ting nodded silently. After Little White digested this star core, it would advance to the 4-star level. He would feed it the 5-star star core sometime in the future. By then, its ability would be on par with its parents. However, on his attributes panel, Little White's second talent, Ghost Fire, was still not activated. Wang Ting was puzzled. Was he using the wrong method? Could it be that Ghost Fire wasn't an ordinary flame, so it needed a special method to awaken it? Although Wang Ting was excited by the prospects, he knew that there was no point thinking about this now. When there was a chance, he would help his pet awaken its talent. "You can leave now. Grow quickly, and don't fall behind me too much." Wang Ting smiled and waved at Little White. Little White rubbed against his palm intimately before cawing in high spirits. It spread its wings and flew away with its flaming body. Wang Ting looked up at the sky until he couldn't see Little White anymore. He retracted his gaze and said, "There's no need to act anymore since you're awake." "Ha ha." Qiu Bo laughed awkwardly behind him. "Young man, you're lucky to be able to get that magnificent star beast to recognize you as its master. I knocked you unconscious, but you're complimenting me." Wang Ting gave him an ambiguous smile. The corners of Qiu Bo's lips trembled slightly. This fellow was touching his tender spot. However, he kept his smile and replied, "You must have a reason for knocking me unconscious. I'm not an insensible person. Your skin sure is thick. You're a talent too, but why do you have to work with the dark apparitions?" Wang Ting shook his head in disappointment. Qiu Bo's expression froze. He said quickly, "I didn't. Don't make up stories. I'm arch enemies with the dark apparitions." Wang Ting ignored him and closed his eyes. He started cultivating. Time passed quickly. 3 hours flew by in a blink of an eye. Qiu Bo didn't know what Wang Ting was doing. He didn't understand why he hadn't left and was sitting around, idling his time away. He got impatient, but he didn't dare to disturb Wang Ting. This young man was handsome, but he had an evil heart. He was ruthless too. If he provoked him, he would be tormented again. He knew how to protect himself. At this moment, Wang Ting opened his eyes and looked at the lake. He shook his head. Despite waiting for a few hours, there was only a limited number of attribute bubbles floating above the lake. It looked like the sea of bubbles he saw had accumulated over the years. Disappointing. He swept them over with his spiritual power and picked them up. Water Force *3 Water Force *2 Water Force *4 After the round of harvest, he received 56 points of Water Force. Wang Ting shook his head. It's time to leave. It wasn't worth wasting his time here. However, before he left, he had something to do. He walked to Qiu Bo and looked him in the eye. A crimson glow flashed past his pupils. Bewitch. Qiu Bo was bewildered. He quickly lost his consciousness due to the vast difference in their spiritual powers. Wang Ting started questioning him. His answers were more or less the same as what he had heard. He felt less worried. After some time, Qiu Bo woke up. His expression was ugly as he exclaimed, "What did you do to me?" Wang Ting didn't reply to him with his mouth. Instead, a brick appeared in his hand. Qiu Bo widened his eyes in shock. He cowered instantly. "What do you want? Let's speak properly. Don't hit my face. I'm sorry, I don't trust you. We are leaving soon, so to prevent you from playing tricks on me, I should knock you unconscious. Wang Ting smiled apologetically and raised his brick. Actually, I need you alive. If not, I'd have killed you directly. A dead man is the safest. Qiu Bo was horrified. The next second. Bang! A dull thud later, Qiu Bo's eyes rolled back, and his vision turned black. He fainted. I used less strength than before. It's just perfect for fainting him. What a benevolent person I am. Wang Ting praised himself. He picked up the half-dead Qiu Bo and walked away casually as if he was holding a dead dog. He didn't go back to the Black Sparrow City immediately. Rather, he hid Qiu Bo and went back to number 56 garrison. The female dark apparition, Phyllis, started questioning Wang Ting when she saw him. He treated her coldly and found an excuse to chase her away. His main purpose in coming back was to find out where the 3 dark apparitions went. Soon, he found out that the 3 dark apparitions left not long after they met Qiu Bo. They didn't care about the other dark apparitions in this garrison, so they didn't notice anything amiss. Wang Ting felt that he was too cautious. The dark apparitions were more careless than he thought. Nothing would happen. He shook his head and left with Qiu Bo. Black Sparrow City. Niu Li and the 2 majors had come back. They quickly reported the situation to their superiors. The news they brought back alerted all the higher authorities of the Black Sparrow Troop. At this moment, Dan Taixian and a few deputy commanders were sitting in a meeting room. Niu Li and the 2 majors were here too. They were sitting on the other end. Dan Taixian placed her hands on her chin and asked gravely, "Is this true?" This piece of news was discovered by recruit Wang Ting. "It shouldn't be wrong," Niu Li replied. "Do you have evidence?" one of the deputy commanders asked. Niu Li choked. Wang Ting heard it personally. Wang Ting is just a recruit. How can you trust the words of a recruit so easily? This is outrageous. The deputy commander scolded angrily. "Cough, old Zhu, the Wang Ting you're talking about is my disciple." A calm voice was heard at this moment. Chapter 427, Wang Ting is back. Everyone. The room turned silent. Everyone's attention was placed on Dan Taixian, who was sitting on the host's seat. Her beautiful face was always calm, and she always gave a relaxed vibe. Even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of her, she could still maintain her composure. But could you consider the feelings of your subordinates? Dan Taixuan's words were like a bomb. They felt as if they were struck by lightning when they heard what she said. Zhu Chengwang was having a mental breakdown. A drop of cold sweat appeared on his head as he looked at Dan Taixian and smiled awkwardly. "Chief Commander, are you serious? Do you think I have nothing better to do than playing tricks with you?" Dan Taixian replied furiously. Zhu Chengwang froze. He looked as though he was choking. Another deputy commander, Song Wanjiang, laughed secretly at his miserable plight. However, he was astounded too. When they were arranging the missions, he had received an order from Dan Taixian. That was why he allowed Wang Ting to take the same mission as Niu Li and the 2 majors. If it wasn't for this reason, Wang Ting wouldn't have had the right to take this mission. He might be powerful, but as a recruit, he lacked experience. It was made possible because of Dan Taixuan's order. Thus, he knew that Dan Taixian was Wang Ting's support. However, he didn't expect him to be Dan Taixuan's disciple. This relationship was stronger than most backgrounds. Niu Li and the 2 majors looked at one another in disbelief. Wang Ting was their chief commander's disciple. Kong Li covered her mouth, almost screaming in shock. Her junior brother was amazing. If this news was made known to others, Wang Ting would become the prince of the Black Sparrow Troop. He could do anything he wanted here. Yuan Xian was appalled too. The muscles on his face trembled violently. He couldn't express his emotions with any words. It felt as if your classmate from high school had become the CEO of a company while you had just graduated from university and were only a white-collar worker. Naturally, the CEO would feel superior. Suddenly, the CEO realized that the white-collar's house got demolished and the government compensated him with many houses. The rents he collected were much higher than his salary. The CEO would feel that the world had forsaken him. All the other higher authorities from the Black Sparrow troop stared at the floor and pretended that this had nothing to do with them. At first, they were questioning the reliability of this information too. After all, it was a serious matter. However, once Dan Taishen opened her mouth, the situation changed. Their chief commander was obviously standing up for her disciple. Actually, even if she didn't speak up for Wang Teng, their relationship alone was enough for them to place high importance on Wang Teng's words. The difference in the power of his words was solely caused by his identity. Ha ha ha, the weather is good today. What did I say just now? Zhu Chengwang finally regained his composure and laughed awkwardly. He changed the topic as if what he said a moment ago was bullshit. As someone in a high position, their skins were all extremely thick. The other didn't take it to heart either. They chuckled and let this matter pass. Going back to business, I believe what Wang Ting said even if there's no evidence. Dan Taishen glanced around her and continued, that brat might be cheeky, but he won't joke around on serious matters. Tell us the details then. Zhu Chengwang nodded and signaled Niu Li to explain further. Niu Li shared with them everything he knew. However, when he told them that Wang Ting had gone to chase the mysterious man alone, they were shocked. This is atrocious, Zhu Chengwang shouted. A second later, he realized what he had said. He turned his head stiffly and coughed. Chief Commander, I'm not saying that has atrocious. I'm talking about myself. I'm atrocious. Dan Taishen nodded in satisfaction. Then, she frowned and yelled, what the hell is he doing? I think he needs a beating. Everyone. Can you please be less obvious with your bias? He said that Hez confident. I didn't agree, but he sneaked away while we were on our way back. Niu Li smiled bitterly. He wasn't going to take the blame. That suits his personality. Dan Taishen shook her head. She didn't reprimand Niu Li. It's going to be hard to settle this matter if we don't have evidence. It affects an entire troop. A slight move may cause a domino effect. We can't just rely on his words, Zhu Chengwang said after some hesitation. We should still inform the Star Maple troop. Whether they believe it or not is up to them, Song Wanjiang suggested. I'll talk to them personally, Dan Taishen said. Everyone nodded. Dan Taishen had to do it personally to show the importance of this news. Niu Li, tell me the exact position. I'll go and see if that brat is still alive. Even if Hez dead, I have to find his corpse. Dan Taishen stood up. She said to all the officers present, the rest of you are dismissed. Contact the Star Maple troop after you leave. I'll head over in 3 hours. The moment she finished speaking, there was a knock on the door. Come in. Dan Taishen frowned and said. A soldier opened the door and saluted. He said hurriedly, reporting, Wang Teng is back. Hez back. Everyone was stunned. Dan Taishen sat back down and smiled. Perfect, I don't have to waste a trip. Send him in. Yes. The soldier received the order. A few moments later, he brought Wang Ting into the meeting room. Some of the officers present had seen Wang Ting before, but some were completely unfamiliar with him. Now that they knew he was Dan Taixuan's disciple, they sized him up carefully when he walked into the room. His back was straight, and he was handsome. The most crucial point was, he was very young. A little too young. The next instant, they were startled. Wang Teng was holding a human-shaped living thing that was in a sorry state. What was going on? Wang Teng was confused. Why did he have to face all these higher authorities the moment he came back? What was the situation? However, when he saw Dan Taishen, he felt at ease. As someone with a powerful background, he wasn't afraid. Come and take a seat. Why are you standing there absent-mindedly? Dan Taishen pointed to the seat beside her and opened her mouth. Okay. Wang Teng sniggered. He strutted over and sat down without any qualms. As for the person in his hand, he casually threw him on the floor beside him. The officers stared at the ceiling. No one said anything. Dan Taishen was the biggest boss here. What she said was always right. You're not dead yet. Dan Taishen glanced at him and said. Wang Ting. What the hell? What's with the strong verbal attack? Wasn't she amiable and kind a moment ago? Why did her attitude change suddenly? Where did you get your guts to chase after a 9-star soldier-level martial warrior? Dan Taixian continued angrily when she noticed that he wasn't speaking. Chapter 428, on the verge of breaking out. Wang Ting understood at once. His master was worried about him. Ladies were always fierce in speech but soft at heart. Wang Ting chuckled in his heart. However, his expression remained unchanged. He coughed softly and said, "Master, don't you believe me? Your disciple is incredibly talented and extremely powerful. Catching a traitor is a piece of cake for me. Look, I brought the fellow back." He kicked the body at the side as he spoke. Everyone felt the corners of their lips trembling. This brat was shameless. But why did this scene seem familiar for some reason? They couldn't help but glance at Dan Taixian. They were enlightened. It was passed down from his master. Dan Taixian ignored everyone's gazes and glared at Wang Ting. She didn't probe further when she noticed that he wasn't injured. Instead, she turned to look at the body and said, "Is this the mysterious man?" "That's right. His name is Qiu Bo, and has an officer from the Star Maple Troop." Wang Ting flipped the body over and continued, "He's still alive. You can question him anytime. I'm sure you'll be able to get some information out of him." Everyone couldn't help but praise Wang Ting. Amazing. Since he was able to bring the traitor back, all their problems were solved. Wang Ting seemed to have some skills. Niu Li and the two majors were astounded. Wang Ting really managed to catch the mysterious man. How did he do it? That was a 9-star soldier-level martial warrior. They couldn't wrap their heads around it and were filled with curiosity. However, they knew one thing. Wang Ting wasn't joking when he said that he was confident in catching the other party. He did have the skills to back his words. Yet, they didn't believe him and thought that he was fooling around. The three of them remembered what happened at that time and felt awkward. They gave a bitter smile. At this moment, Qiu Bo's finger moved. Wang Ting might have used too much force just now and woke him up. He opened his eyes in confusion and sized up his surroundings. The first person he saw was Wang Ting sitting in front of him. His expression changed entirely, and he wailed in fear, "You devil, you can kill or skin me alive, but if you slap my face one more time, I won't let you go even if I turn into a ghost." He sounded so tragic that it made everyone's imagination run wild. What did this fellow go through? Why was he terrified? When they saw Qiu Bo's face, their expression turned strange. His face had turned into a pig's head. Everyone glanced at the poker-faced Wang Ting. Their chief commander's disciple was a ruthless person. He beat this person so inhumanly. Cough, cough. Wang Ting coughed awkwardly. He was afraid that others would misunderstand him and think that he was a pervert who liked to torture people. This would affect his valiant and outstanding image. Hence, he remained patient and explained in a soft tone, "Qiu Bo, I did it for your sake. The journey back was filled with bumps, and you were injured so badly. I slapped you unconscious so that you wouldn't be able to feel the pain. That way, you wouldn't have to suffer on the way back." Qiu Bo wanted to cry. Was this what a person should say? He beat him up brutally and told him it was for his sake. Could you be a little more shameless? The atmosphere turned weird. All the officers present had a clearer understanding of Wang Ting. His shamelessness was no lesser than his master's. Kong Li and Yuan Xian stared at him speechlessly. They didn't know what to say. Wang Ting didn't know what everyone was thinking. He felt that his explanation was useful, so he continued, "However, I won't slap you anymore. You can feel at ease now." Qiu Bo was puzzled. He didn't trust Wang Ting. Suddenly, he realized something was amiss. Feel at ease. He felt that he wanted him to die in peace. "We're already here." Wang Ting noticed that he didn't believe him, so he enlightened him. "They were here. Where?" Qiu Bo could still move his neck, so he glanced around him. Many high-ranked officers were sitting on the chairs, looking at him amiably with a smile on their faces. This environment, this atmosphere, he seemed to be home. My foot. Qiu Bo turned as white as a sheet. Damn it. He was dead. He was in the hands of the military. All his secrets would be exposed. Carry him down. Don't let him die an easy death, Dan Taishen said. A few soldiers charged in after she finished speaking and carried Qiu Bo away. Qiu Bo didn't shout. He had probably resigned himself to fate. Dan Taishen waved at Wang Ting. All right, your part has ended. You can do whatever you want now. Wang Ting. Are you kicking me to the curb after using me? You're so cold-blooded. Wang Ting felt bitter. He had committed a huge merit. Shouldn't they be discussing his rewards now? Did she forget about it? He remembered Dan Taixuan's style and felt that this was possible. He started winking at his master frantically. Do you have sand in your eyes? Dan Taishen asked curiously. Wang Ting. You just need to blow your eyes to get rid of the sand. Do you need your dear master to help you? Dan Taishen asked calmly. Wang Ting's eyes felt better instantly. Dan Taishen was scary. He couldn't offend her. Wang Ting didn't care about the military exploits anymore. If they belonged to him, they wouldn't run anywhere. Dan Taishen wouldn't let her disciple suffer. He wondered what rank he would be able to rise to. A corporal was too low. He should be at least a company officer. After that, someone came to ask him about the details of the mission. Wang Ting filtered what he could tell. As for unimportant information like the snow jade tree and the celestites he stole, they didn't have to know. Even if Qiu Bo told them about it, they couldn't do anything to him. As Dan Taixuan's disciple, no one would dare to snatch it from him. After handing over the mission, they walked out of the meeting room. The three of them found it unreal when they saw Wang Ting's relaxed manner. He looked as though he had just come back from a holiday. How did you catch Qiu Bo? Kong Li leaned over and whispered to him. She knew that there must be secrets, but she couldn't contain her curiosity. Niu Li and Yuan Xian looked over. They were also eager to know. That was a 9-star soldier-level martial warrior. However, he got caught by Wang Ting, and judging from his state, he must have been tormented violently. The process was probably full of twists and excitement. I'm very powerful, so I used my skill to suppress him, Wang Ting said in a righteous tone. Who are you trying to fool? How can a 7-star soldier level suppress a 9-star soldier level? Kong Li was speechless. How do you think I caught him? Wang Ting asked her back. TSK, you don't have to tell me if you don't want to. Kong Li rolled her eyes at him. They chatted casually along the way as they prepared to go back for some rest. After some time, Kong Li grabbed Wang Ting's shoulder and asked, the mission has ended. Do you want to have some fun? Cough, a little fun is enough. Wang Ting glanced at Niu Li and Yuan Xian and replied calmly. You too. Niu Li didn't know what to say. He shook his head. The mission has ended, but the issue hasn't been solved yet. There might be a huge task tomorrow. Know your boundaries, and don't go overboard with the fun. Don't worry, don't worry. I'm a sensible person. Kong Li waved and walked over with her hands over Wang Ting's shoulder. When Yuan Xian saw them leaving, a glint flashed past his eyes. He bade farewell to Niu Li and turned to leave. Wang Ting and Kong Li had a fun time eating and playing outside. They only came to the dormitory late at night. When he was preparing to enter his room, Wang Ting noticed that the two rooms beside him were very quiet. Han Zhu and Wn Baiqiu were still on their missions. It made sense. His mission didn't take up too much time, ending in a few days. Compared to the rest, it was much shorter. Han Zhu and Wn Baiqiu's mission shouldn't be difficult. However, since they were undergoing training, it wouldn't be short. Wang Ting shook his head and stopped thinking about them. He sat cross-legged on his bed and started cultivating. The next day, just like what Niu Li said, they received a mission notification at around 10 a.m. from the higher authorities. Wang Ting, Niu Li, and the two majors gathered in a meeting room again. The four of them looked at one another. No one spoke. Despite waiting for some time, no one came. Kong Li got impatient and asked, Niu Li, did you receive any information from the higher-ups? Can you reveal some things to us? I didn't receive any notification. Niu Li shook his head. We're probably heading to Star Maple Troop to reinforce them, Yuan Xian guessed. Hey, that's not bad. Wang Ting will definitely get first-class merit. However, since we worked with him, we should be able to get some soup too. Kong Li's eyes lit up. She sniggered. Wang Ting, well, bask in your reflected glory. Senior sister, stop kidding. The missions are all arranged by the higher authorities. It's got nothing to do with me, Wang Ting said. The door of the meeting room finally opened, and Song Wanjiang walked in. It looks like you all have guessed it. The four of them hurriedly stood up and saluted. All right, let's talk business. Yesterday, we dug some information out of Chiobo. Chief Commander personally brought him back to the Star Maple Troop overnight and had an entire night of meeting there. They're already preparing for war. It's on the verge of breaking out. Song Wanjiang's words caused the four of them to turn serious. War was a heavy word. Its appearance meant blood and death. Even if they were at an advantage, many people would still die in the end. Song Wanjiang said grimly, the dark apparitions have invaded the Xingwu continent for many years. All along, we have been at a disadvantage. This time, we finally got to control the situation. We must gather all our strength and give them a violent knock on the head. Wang Teng exchanged glances with the others. They could detect the determination of the humans from Song Wanjiang's words. They felt invigorated. Even a selfish person like Wang Ting felt a little impulsive. He wanted to get on the battlefield and kill some enemies. He wanted to take revenge for all the sacrifices humankind had suffered over the years. Your mission is very important. After our discussion, we've decided to let each of you lead an advance force and head to the Star Maple Troop. You will listen to the Chief Commander when you're there. Do you have any questions? Song Wanjiang asked seriously. No. All right, prepare to leave. Song Wanjiang nodded in satisfaction. Yes. Niu Li, Kong Li, and Yuan Xian shouted in high spirits. Yes. Wang Teng replied in a lazy tone. Everyone. Chapter 429, A masked martial warrior in the underground training area. Song Wanjiang felt anger surging into his heart when he saw Wang Teng's lazy manner. This is an important matter. Can you be more serious? But the moment he remembered Wang Ting's background, he would glance behind Wang Ting uncontrollably. He felt as if Dan Taixian was standing there. Never mind, he would be benevolent and forgive the wrongdoings of this young man. As a deputy chief commander, he had no reason to harbor a grudge against a small corporal. He turned to look at Kong Li and Yuan Xian. As expected, they were more soothing to his eyes. We don't want to alert the dark apparitions, so this mission is confidential. Your identity will be normal martial warriors, and you will each lead a small team, heading to Star Maple City from different directions. All the necessary equipment has been prepared for you in number 3 underground training area. You can go and get them, Song Wanjiang said. Wang Teng and the others nodded. They saluted at Song Wanjiang and prepared to leave. After taking your equipment, don't create any commotion. You will hide in the Force floating airships transporting our daily goods and get out of the city using it. Remember, time is tight. You need to hurry to Star Maple City before midnight tomorrow. Song Wanjiang gave his last reminder. Understood. The four of them turned around and left. Song Wanjiang stood alone in the room for a long time before he walked out. The four of them hurriedly made some preparations and met up again. Wang Ting followed Niu Li and the others to a heavily guarded building. After confirming their identities, the guards let them in. They strode inside and passed through a corridor made of steel. A row of elevators appeared in their vision. Niu Li and the others seemed familiar with this place. They brought him to an elevator with the number 3 written in front. The lift door opened. There was only one button beside the door. When Wang Teng and the others entered the lift and pressed it, they immediately felt a sense of weightlessness. The elevator traveled at a fast speed. The underground training area seemed exceptionally deep. It felt as if they had jumped down from a building. Fortunately, they were all martial warriors and had a strong mentality. If not, they might not be able to handle this excitement. After some time, the elevator trembled abruptly and opened with a swoosh. Wang Teng and the others walked out calmly. The first thing they saw was an enormous underground space filled with all kinds of weapons. There were already many people in the underground training area. They were split into 4 teams and were waiting quietly. These people were dressed in black battle uniforms and were wearing all kinds of strange masks on their faces. Wang Ting's expression turned strange. This scene was beyond his expectations. They didn't look like they were going to war. Instead, this seemed like a large-scale cosplay game. He turned to look at Niu Li and the others. They didn't seem surprised by the scene. He immediately rearranged his expression to prevent them from thinking he was a frog in the well. After the martial warriors in the underground training area saw them, they suddenly raised their hands and saluted. They were extremely organized and neat. "Sir." The fierce and low voices of these martial warriors reverberated in the underground area. Niu Li and the others saluted back. Wang Ting was helpless, feeling that he needed to salute everywhere in the military. "We will each pick a team from the 4 teams. You guys can choose first," Niu Li said at this moment. "I'm all right with any of them," Wang Ting replied calmly. Niu Li opened his mouth and wanted to persuade him otherwise. However, he remembered what had happened before and decided to shut up. His face was still hurting from the slap in the face. "I won't be polite then, hehe." Kong Li didn't push away the offer. She carefully examined the 4 teams and felt their auras to analyze their power. This mission wasn't easy, and they wouldn't be able to complete it on their own. On the battlefield, unless they were general stage martial warriors, they weren't capable of fighting their enemies alone. Hence, the abilities of their subordinates were crucial. This would affect their performance in this mission. If they could perform outstandingly and get merits, they might be able to rise to another rank. At their age, the major rank was their limit. Ordinary military exploits weren't enough for them to climb the ladder. They had to make outstanding contributions during a large-scale battle and gather enough reputation if they wanted to advance another step. Obviously, this mission was a great chance. While Kong Li was choosing her team, Yuan Xian didn't slack off either. He glanced at Wang Ting. He was still unwilling to accept this young man, but he wouldn't let his emotions get the better of him. He immediately started choosing his team. At this moment, a flash of light appeared in Wang Ting's eyes. He had activated his spiritual sight. He glanced through the martial warriors and was astounded. These martial warriors were all 3-star soldier level and above. The most powerful ones were at the 5-star soldier level. Every team's arrangement was the same. There were 2 5-star soldier level, 10 4-star soldier level, and 33-star soldier level martial warriors. With this ability, if they were outside, they would dominate wherever they went. Of course, there was a difference in the ability of the individuals. This was why Kong Li and Yuan Xian chose their teams so carefully. After some time, the 2 of them made their decision. "Which one will you choose?" Niu Li asked. This time, Wang Ting didn't reject his offer. He pointed to the team on the left and said, "I'll choose them." Actually, among the 4 teams, the one he chose was the strongest. With his spiritual sight, he saw that more than half of the martial warriors in this team had thicker force in their bodies as compared to the other teams. Especially the 5-star and 4-star soldier-level martial warriors. Their battle ability must be high. This couldn't be seen from their appearance. Kong Li and Yuan Xian would never have imagined that after choosing for such a long time, the strongest team still landed in Wang Ting's hand. Just like that, the allocation of the team was completed. There was a table with nothing except for a mask in front of all the teams. The 4 of them walked in front of their teams. Wang Ting felt speechless. He took the mask on the table and flipped it over to take a look. This was a cat mask. Actually, it still looked alright since most of the others were wearing animal masks, but this mask seemed a little cute. Wang Ting felt even more speechless than before. What on earth is this? Why did you give such a cute mask for this serious mission? Who came up with this idea? This is outrageous. No wonder they placed the mask facing down. They didn't want him to see the mask. Had he seen the front of the mask, he would never have chosen this team, even if they were the strongest. He wouldn't let his dignity as a man get trampled. Wang Ting couldn't help but glance at the mask in the other officer's hands. Wang Ting. The bitterness in his heart became stronger. Why were their masks normal? He could feel a malicious intent from their mask. This was how martial warriors should look on the battlefield. Under Wang Ting's unhappy gaze, Niu Li and the others suddenly felt a strong resentment floating towards them. They were stunned. What is this? Why is this fellow looking at us so bitterly? When they saw Wang Ting's mask, they understood immediately. Their expressions turned weird as they tried their best to control their laughter. However, Kong Li didn't give him any face. She burst out laughing without any restraint. One ha ha ha. Chapter 430, Code, Ghost Crow ha ha ha, why are you laughing? Wang Ting glared at Kong Li, feeling that he had suffered a huge humiliation. This girl was outrageous. Cough, I'm not going to laugh anymore. Phut, ha ha ha, I'm sorry. I can't control myself. Kong Li walked over and burst out laughing again when she saw Wang Ting's exasperated expression. She held onto his shoulder and laughed until she bent backward and forward. She was beside herself. Niu Li and Yuan Xian couldn't control themselves either, revealing happy smiles. They would have laughed if the situation wasn't so dire. Come, junior brother, wear it and let your senior take a look. I think this cat mask is not bad. It suits your vibe, Kong Li teased him after laughing for some time. Go away. Wang Ting slapped her hand away in anger. Come on, wear it. It's really not bad. Kong Li didn't give up. She continued urging him. Wang Ting ignored her. He shifted his gaze and said to Yuan Xian, Major Yuan, why don't we change our masks? I think that this mask is more suitable for you. Yuan Xian snorted coldly. His expression changed. Wang Ting didn't give up. He turned to Niu Li and said earnestly, Old Niu, how about we exchange our masks? Trust me, if you wear this, you will definitely return to your youth and get a new lease of life like the sprouts on a withered tree in spring. You will mesmerize thousands of ladies, more than Major Yuan. You will become the new idol of the military. Niu Li felt the muscles on his face twitch. Veins bulged out on his forehead. Young brat, don't you know how to speak properly? What do you mean by return to my youth? What do you mean by getting a new lease of life? Am I very old? To a martial warrior, 30 years still meant youth, yet this brat was calling him old. He was so insensible. Don't you want to switch masks with me? You can continue daydreaming. Ha ha ha, no one will exchange with you. Kong Li guffawed at his plight. Wang Ting was boiling with rage. Suddenly, his eyes lit up. Why don't even think about it. I'm not changing with you. Kong Li rolled her eyes. She rejected him before he could finish his sentence. She fiddled with the bear mask in her hand and said, I think my mask is awesome. TSK, what kind of taste is that? Wang Ting said with disdain. All right, stop fooling around. Time is tight. We should leave now. Niu Li said at this moment. All right, since no one likes you, let me dote on you. Wang Ting shook his head and sighed. He knocked the cat mask in his hand. The mask is to conceal your identity to prevent others from recognizing you through your pictures. It's not an ornament, Niu Li replied helplessly. Wang Ting remained quiet. Niu Li continued, since we are hiding our identities, we can't use our real names. We need a code name. Code name? Wang Ting asked curiously, this feels like a spy movie. Niu Li glared at him. My code name is Raging Bull. Kong Li is Peacock, and Yuan Xian is Wolf Wen. You're a recruit, so you don't have a code name yet. You can pick one yourself. We'll call each other by our code names from now on. This is so troublesome. Wang Ting felt helpless, but he still pondered over it. It was his first time thinking of a code name for himself. It felt strange to him, so he couldn't come up with one for a long time. Why don't you call yourself Cute Cat? Kong Li teased him. Not bad. Yuan Xian nodded in approval. Enough. Wang Ting glared at them. Suddenly, he had an idea. A smile appeared at the corner of his lips as he said, I've thought of mine. My codename will be Ghost Crow. Ghost Crow. Kong Li and Yuan Xian repeated the name. Niu Li was afraid that they would continue wasting time here. He waved his hands hurriedly and said, this codename is not bad. All right, it's decided. Wear your mask, and let's leave. Their jokes ended there. They turned serious and headed towards another exit in the underground training area. Along the way, everyone wore their masks. Wang Ting also stopped hesitating. It was just a mask. Besides Kong Li, Yuan Xian, and Niu Li, no one knew who he was. It wasn't too embarrassing. The 4 teams followed behind their leaders. A few moments later, they arrived at the Force floating airship docking station. There were already people waiting for them. "Take care of yourself." The 4 of them exchanged glances and said some parting words. Then, they brought their teams onto the Force floating airship and flew off into the horizon. Wang Ting and his 42 subordinates sat in the transportation cabin, staring at each other awkwardly. Wang Ting didn't know what to do. These soldiers were extremely uptight. They only knew how to follow commands. If he didn't open his mouth, they wouldn't say a single word. After some time, Wang Ting coughed and said, "Why don't you introduce yourselves?" "Well, start with, the 2 of you." He waved his finger around and finally pointed at the 2 5-star soldier-level martial warriors. The 2 martial warriors were shocked and exchanged glances with each other secretly. These martial warriors belonged to a special department, so all of them had learned concealing skills to hide their cultivation. Usually, outsiders wouldn't be able to see their true abilities. Yet, Wang Ting was able to point them out accurately among all the soldiers. They didn't believe that this was based on pure luck. This exceptionally young leader must have noticed something. A moment ago, when the team saw Wang Ting's light-hearted attitude, they felt a little regretful. They wondered if it was luck or misfortune to have such a leader. Now, the 2 martial warriors finally realized that this young man wasn't an ordinary guy. Anyone that could be sent by the higher authorities to be their leader wouldn't be a normal person. Wang Ting's intention of doing this was to show his ability to the soldiers. Any powerful person was proud. Hence, these martial warriors would more or less have some unhappiness and doubts towards him, their leader who dropped from the sky. Especially when compared to Kong Li and the others. He had no reputation and was extremely young. A youngster was normally thought to be weaker in ability. He was too lazy to explain to them, so he directly used this method to shock them. These martial warriors weren't stupid. He believed that they would notice something. Under Wang Ting's calm gaze, one of the soldiers took off his mask, revealing the face of a man around 30 years old. He opened his mouth and said, "Codename, Ice Wind." Then, he put on his mask and kept quiet again. He didn't mention his ability. He stared intently and directly into Wang Ting's eyes. Wang Ting remained indifferent, having no intention to probe further. He turned and signaled the other person to speak. Surprisingly, the other martial warrior was a lady around 27 years old. There was a scar that looked like a centipede covering half of her face. She said in a cold voice, "Codename, Black Widow." After she finished speaking, she glanced at Wang Ting and wore her mask again. She didn't mention her ability either. Wang Ting felt his teeth hurting. "Black Widow? What kind of name is this? Why don't you act in the Avengers?" Moreover, the Black Widow in the Avengers was prettier than this lady. This lady was, without the scar, she should be pretty too. Next, the other people started to introduce themselves. They only said their code names and took off their mask to allow Wang Ting to recognize their faces. Wang Ting touched his chin and scanned his subordinates. All his subordinates seemed unruly. 1. Chapter 431. This team is not easy to lead. Wang Ting looked at his subordinates and lamented in his heart. Actually, this mission of leading a team shouldn't be given to him. But he was the one who discovered the piece of news. He was also powerful enough and had Dan Taixian backing him up. All these factors allowed him to stand in this position even though he had no qualifications. Wang Ting knew that many of his subordinates hadn't accepted him yet. However, he didn't want to explain himself. Sometimes, the impact of words was minimal. There was no point in talking too much. He knew the faces of all his subordinates now. The 2 5-star soldier-level martial warriors gave him a deep impression. If used properly, they would be the sharpest weapons in his team. At least for this mission. At this moment, a soldier walked over and saluted. He said, "Report, The force floating airship will pass by Mount Guizhou in half an hour. Wang Teng was wearing his mask, so his voice was a little muffled. He nodded and replied, I understand. After the soldier walked away, he looked at his subordinates and said, once we reach Mount Guizhou, we will leave the force floating airship and make a detour north. From there, we'll head to Star Maple City. Yes, sir, everyone shouted in unison. Although they didn't like Wang Teng, on the surface, they still respected his order. Wang Teng didn't say much. He glanced at Icewind and Black Widow and closed his eyes. He leaned against the cargo behind him and rested. This force-floating airship was specially used for transporting goods. Hence, there were all kinds of cargo boxes inside. The other martial warriors sat cross-legged on the floor and rested with closed eyes, waiting patiently. Half an hour passed quickly. Wang Teng slowly opened his eyes. The other martial warriors also opened their eyes in unplanned unison, the gazes behind their masks sharp and focused. Wang Teng thought more highly of his subordinates when he saw how well trained they were. Wang Teng didn't say anything, though. He stood up, walked to the door of the airship, and pulled it open. Gusts of strong wind blew into the cabin. The hair on his forehead danced in the air. The next moment, he stepped out without any hesitation. Behind Wang Teng, Icewind and Black Widow exchanged glances with one another. A glint flashed past their eyes. Then, they jumped out of the force-floating airship too. The other martial warriors followed suit. Among these martial warriors, besides Black Widow and Icewind, who were at the 5-star soldier level and had force wings that allowed them to fly in the air, the others relied on rune equipment. All of them had a rune device on their backs. After activating the runes on it, a pair of mechanical wings would spread out, helping them fly in the sky. If someone looked up from the ground, he would see many black dots suddenly appearing in the air. These black dots grew larger gradually and landed in the same place. Wang Teng floated above the peak of a mountain so that his subordinates would be able to see him. Icewind and Black Widow scanned the mountain and immediately saw Wang Teng. They flapped their force wings and shot towards him. When they came close, their pupils constricted in surprise. There were no force wings behind him. He wasn't using any rune equipment either. He was just floating in the air. This meant that he was at least 7-star soldier level. Their leader was a 7-star soldier level formidable warrior. How was this possible? He was so young, even younger than Major Yuan and Major Kong, yet he had reached such heights. They were both in disbelief. They did guess that his level wouldn't be low since the higher authorities let him lead them, but they thought that he was at most at the 5-star soldier level or 6-star soldier level. They didn't even think about him being a 7-star soldier level martial warrior. After all, the difference between the 6-star soldier level and the 7-star soldier level was vast. For the soldier level, every 3 stars represented an obstacle. By rank, 6-star and 7-star had a difference of only 1 star, but the actual gap was huge. These two levels were incomparable. Icewind and Black Widow were stunned. They looked at each other involuntarily before following Wang Teng quietly. They bent their bodies slightly to show their respect. No matter where you were, strength was the best explanation. A strong person would always gain respect. Wang Teng didn't say nor do anything, but none of them dared to belittle him anymore. The others hurried over one after another. They kept the wings behind their backs and landed on the ground gently. At the same time, they had also noticed Wang Teng's situation. Behind their masks, their expressions were the same as Icewind and Black Widow. They were astounded. "Is everyone here?" After a few minutes, Wang Teng asked. Icewind didn't dare to waste any time. He took a step forward and called the roll. Then, he replied to Wang Teng, "Yes, let's go." Wang Teng gave his order and turned into flashes of lingering shadows. He rushed in a certain direction. Based on the military's requirement, they needed to arrive at Star Maple City before midnight. It was noon now. The distance between them and the city meant that time was tight. If Wang Teng was alone, he didn't need much time. However, the 3-star and 4-star soldier-level martial warriors under him couldn't move so quickly. The team of martial warriors traveled relentlessly and quickly through the mountain. Some of them leaped through trees while others ran on the ground. They were scattered within a small area, stabbing through the forest like a sharp blade. They were in the wild, so star beasts would appear occasionally and attack them. However, the star beasts would be torn into pieces by the sharp blade. Wang Ting didn't help them. He observed his subordinates at the side to judge their abilities. He realized that his subordinates weren't just strong. They worked well together too. Their performance on the journey surprised him. Also, he managed to pick up many attribute bubbles without doing anything. Unknowingly, his ability increased. On the way, a 6-star beast appeared in front of everyone. Nonetheless, under Ice Wind and Black Widow's instructions, they still managed to gain the upper hand. Sometime later, the 6-star beast roared in anger and started attacking without any constraints. It charged towards 2 4-star soldier-level martial warriors, attempting to bring them down with it. Ice Wind and Black Widow's expressions changed. At this moment, a crimson-red light penetrated the star beast's head. The star beast froze, the glimmer in its eyes disappearing completely. However, its huge body still slammed down on the 2 4-star soldier-level martial warriors due to inertia. Bang! The 2 martial warriors were thrown off their feet. Fortunately, they weren't injured. They stood up immediately and felt lucky. Then, their gazes turned to Wang Ting, who was standing on a branch to their left. He stood there calmly and kept his finger. It looked as though he didn't do anything. Everyone was thunderstruck. One finger. He used one finger to kill a 6-star beast. How powerful was he? Ice Wind and Black Widow couldn't believe what they saw. For the first time, Wang Ting had given them a preview of his power. Thank you, sir. The 2 martial warriors who were saved bowed and thanked him immediately. Chapter 432, Encounter. Stay alert. I hope that none of you will get hurt before we reach Star Maple City. I can't afford to lose my face, Wang Ting spoke indifferently. Yes, the 2 martial warriors replied instantly, feeling embarrassed. Continue. Wang Ting waved his hand and kept the corpse of the 6-star beast. Then, he turned into a ray of light and shot towards the horizon. The soldiers behind him tidied themselves quickly and dashed after Wang Ting. Soon, it was nighttime. The team stopped for a break. They took the chance to recover their force and eat some dried goods to curb their hunger. Wang Ting didn't like the dried goods, so he used his fire force to quickly barbecue a piece of starbeast meat. He took out the seasoning he had brought along and sprinkled it on the meat. Done. The intense fragrance wafted through the air. The sound of people swallowing their saliva rang out in the silent night. Although the conditions were poor, he was still a force chef master. Hence, the food he made was perfect in aroma, taste, and appearance. No matter how calm the other martial warriors were, they were unable to resist the temptation of good food. That is, or a force dish. Black Widow exclaimed in her cold voice. It was rare for her to lose control. Is our leader a force chef master? Ice Wind asked with a weird expression. After witnessing Wang Ting's ability, they had gradually started to acknowledge Wang Ting's status as their leader. I'm afraid so. Black Widow was speechless. This is unexpected. Sigh, my dried food is tasteless now. Ice Wind bit the compressed biscuit in his hand and sighed. Sniffing the fragrance in the air, he swallowed his saliva again. He wasn't the only one. The other soldiers were glaring at Wang Ting with hidden bitterness. Outrageous. They were eating dried goods, but their leader was eating a force dish. Shouldn't he show some care for his subordinates and distribute some force food to everyone? Shouldn't he use the chance to win their favor? They had their principles, so they wouldn't be bought over with one force meal. But there was nothing wrong with accepting the kindness of their leader once in a while. Unfortunately, they could only think about it. Wang Ting disregarded them entirely and ate his food himself. "Temph, do you think that I can't handle you guys? I haven't forgotten the opening gambit you gave me." As a narrow-minded leader, he had many ways of taking revenge on disobedient and insensible subordinates. After resting, they continued their journey. Late in the night, Wang Ting suddenly received a warning from Little White. Little White had always been following him and helping him scan the surroundings. It provided him valuable aid. Wang Ting signaled everyone to stop. Ice Wind, Black Widow, and the other martial warriors looked at him curiously. Wang Ting didn't say anything. He closed his eyes and changed his vision. Soon, he was able to see a spot in the forest a few thousand meters away from them. A group of people was in a heated battle. One party was a group of humans in black battle uniforms and wearing masks. They were dressed similarly to Wang Ting's team. The other was a pack of gale wolves. They were extremely powerful, and there were more than 100 of them. They surrounded the human martial warriors and put them in a dangerous position. Without a doubt, the motive of the masked martial warriors must be the same as them. Wang Ting hesitated for a moment. Then, he waved his hand and led his team in that direction. A few minutes later, they stopped a few hundred meters from the battleground. They watched the fight from afar. The other martial warriors were stunned, glancing at Wang Ting involuntarily. Did he detect this fight just now? It was obvious that he had sensed something, the reason he rushed here instantly. Even a 9-star soldier-level martial warrior might not detect the fight at that distance. How did their leader do it? They are probably the advance force of a certain troop. Wang Ting suddenly opened his mouth. We actually managed to meet them, Ice Wind exclaimed. The troops are heading to Star Maple City using the same route. It's not strange to bump into them, Black Widow said. However, they are really unlucky. They met a pack of gale wolves, Ice Wind said. The moment Wang Ting and his team arrived, the martial warriors who were surrounded by the gale wolves had noticed them. They were stunned for a moment before they rejoiced. Someone even shouted for help directly. Shall we help them? Black Widow asked. There are many gale wolves. Even if we join in, there might still be sacrifices, Ice Wind frowned and said. We won't die. Let's go. Wang Ting said indifferently. Yes. Everyone shouted in unison. Ice Wind didn't object further. With a 7-star soldier-level formidable warrior among them, this pack of gale wolves wasn't a threat. They turned into rays of lights and darted into the battlefield. The martial warriors surrounded by the gale wolves were in a dire state. Fortunately, Wang Ting and his team had arrived on time. If not, they would have suffered heavy casualties. After Wang Ting's team entered the fray, the pressure on them lightened tremendously. However, the gale wolves still won by numbers. They specialized in speed, so the martial warriors had a hard time fighting with them. Howl. The howl of a wolf ran in the air continuously. It seemed to be commanding the wolf pack, making them cooperate like humans. They were tough to handle. Wang Ting scanned the crowd and noticed a 7-star soldier-level martial warrior. However, the martial warrior was surrounded by numerous 6-star gale wolves, so the person couldn't break free no matter how hard he tried. The person noticed Wang Ting, who was standing not far away. She frowned and shouted, Hey, why are you looking all distracted? Come and help me. Wang Ting was dumbfounded. Under the thick battle uniform, he couldn't tell that this 7-star soldier-level martial warrior was actually a lady. Nonetheless, he ignored her and continued scanning the pack. Gradually, he furrowed his brows. How is that possible? He guessed that there must be a wolf king among the gale wolves. They couldn't cooperate with such chemistry without one. He wanted to find the wolf king, but he realized that the most powerful gale wolf was a 6-star. There was no one above this level. Could it be that the wolf king isn't there? Wang Ting wondered to himself. Hey, can you help quickly? Are you planning to let us die here? The 7-star soldier-level martial warrior shouted again. Shut up. Wang Ting retorted coldly. You. The 7-star soldier-level martial warrior was furious. Wang Ting didn't have the time to care about her. His mind was working at full speed. There's one more possibility. The Wolf King isn't the strongest of the wolf pack. This situation was unbelievable. Survival of the fittest had always been the rule in the world of star beasts. Their king must be the most powerful of their kind. That was how it could lead them to survive in this brutal environment. It was impossible for a weakling to become the king. Unless one of them possessed a special talent the others didn't have. Even so, how can I find it? Wang Ting felt his head spinning. He thought that he would be able to find the strongest Wolf King using his spiritual sight, but he met this unexpected special situation. Chapter 433, Wolf King Reign. The pack of wolves attacked the martial warriors fiercely. They seemed famished. Even if this bone was a little hard to bite, they were unwilling to give up. Gale wolves were known for their speed. They were already hard to deal with, but now, they had the advantage of numbers too. Even a tiger was afraid of a pack of wolves. This showed how terrifying a pack of bloodthirsty wolves was. The human martial warriors kept retreating as they fought against the 100 wolves. Many of them were already injured. The 7-star soldier-level martial warrior was indignant at Wang Teng's negligence. But she couldn't do anything. Wang Teng ignored her completely. This bastard. Xie Shuiya gritted her teeth in anger. She cursed Wang Teng 1,000 times in her heart. Most of her subordinates were injured, so they might not be able to withstand it for long. If someone died, she wouldn't have the face to be their leader anymore. She begged her family to give her this chance to participate in this mission. She thought it would be an opportunity for her to realize her ambition and prove to everyone that she wasn't a delicate and weak young miss. Her family would only recognize her and look at her straight in the face if she displayed adequate ability. This was the only way for her to grasp her own fate. But now, all her hopes were dashed. Suddenly, Xie Shuiya saw 3 gale wolves pouncing on her subordinate. He was about to get bitten and eaten by them. Her expression changed, and she wanted to help him. However, the 6-star gale wolves around her turned into lingering shadows and surrounded her. She was unable to break free. Get off. Xie Shuiya turned anxious. She screamed and slashed her long sword at one of the gale wolves in anger. A flash of contempt flashed past in the gale wolf's eyes. It swung its claws, shooting out several wind blades. With a few loud clangs, they shattered the sword glow flying towards it. A few wind blades flew towards Xie Shuiya. However, Xie Shuiya ignored them and waved her long sword frantically. Sword glow flashed through the air as she tried to get out of the encirclement. Slash. The wind blade cut a few wounds on her body. Fresh blood spurted out. Why did this woman suddenly turn crazy? Wang Teng was searching for the traces of the Wolf King when he saw this scene. He frowned. He thought of something and looked in the direction where Xie Shuiya was staring. He understood at once. The next moment, 3 crimson glows bolted out from his finger and landed accurately on the 3 gale wolves. The 3 gale wolves died on the spot before they had the chance to dodge. Xie Shuiya was staggered. It's him. The person who saved her subordinate was the fellow who had been standing indifferently at the side. Xie Shuiya never expected this. Also, he was so powerful. He killed 3 gale wolves in a single attack. She could do it too, but not in such a relaxed manner. This meant that the other party's ability was higher than hers. However, this person seemed conflicting. When she asked him for help, he refused. When she didn't call him, he helped her subordinate voluntarily. Xie Shuiya was getting confused by this young man. Wang Ting didn't notice Xie Shuiya's gaze. After saving the soldier, he continued looking for the Wolf King. That was the pressing matter. However, he had also realized that he shouldn't underestimate the ability of this pack of gale wolves. Thus, he paid some attention to the safety of his subordinates. As their leader, he didn't want to follow behind them like their nanny, but he mustn't let them die in this insignificant battle. Wang Ting's spiritual power was strong enough to cover the entire battleground. Hence, he was able to immediately detect anyone in danger and lend them a helping hand. With his addition, the pressure on the human martial warriors dropped tremendously. Their morale was boosted, and they started charging towards the gale wolves once again. In the blink of an eye, numerous gale wolves were killed by the human martial warriors. An idea popped up in Wang Ting's mind. He slapped his forehead in frustration. He was so stupid. Why wasn't he using his spiritual power? It was the simplest method. Was he stupid? The Wolf King was able to command the pack, so its intelligence must be high. In that case, its spirit attribute would most likely surpass its companions. Wang Teng believed that the Wolf King wouldn't be able to escape the radar of his spiritual power. The next instant, a A mighty spiritual power seeped out from his forehead and spread to the surroundings. As expected, a few moments later, Wang Ting noticed something amiss among the gale wolves to his left. Gotcha! Wang Ting's eyes lit up. He disappeared on the spot and abruptly appeared beside a 5-star gale wolf. He slammed his palm down. The gale wolves around him roared in anger and pounced on Wang Ting. Wang Ting snorted. Force surged out of his body, throwing the gale wolves around him into the air. During this time, his palm didn't stop. It landed on the body of the gale wolf. Bang! Blood flowed down the nose, eyes, ears, and mouth of the gale wolf. Before it could howl in pain, it died. Howl! The gale wolves around them trembled. They looked in Wang Ting's direction in unplanned unison and howled solemnly as they looked up at the night sky. Indeed, this is the Wolf King. Wang Ting smiled as he looked at the ground. After the Wolf King died, a few attribute bubbles had dropped there. Spiritual Realm Spirit *50 Spiritual Realm Enlightenment *60 Wind Force *210 Wolf King Reign *1 blank Attribute *75 Wang Ting was surprised after he picked up the attribute bubbles. He couldn't help but feel a little astounded. Spiritual Realm Spirit and Enlightenment. This Wolf King is indeed special. Also, he muttered in his heart before examining the changes in his attributes panel. In the battle technique row, a special technique had appeared. It was the Wolf King Reign. This was most likely why Gale Wolf was able to become the Wolf King. It was all thanks to this talent. Without it, the other 6-star Gale Wolves wouldn't be willing to follow it. Well, even the other 5-star Gale Wolves might not want to listen to it. After Wang Ting received the Wolf King Reign, a hint of joy flashed past his eyes. This skill was not bad. He had the Wolf King Reign now, so it meant that he had the ability to reign over the wolf pack. Furthermore, the Wolf King Reign was considered a spirit-type skill. The higher his spiritual power, the stronger his control over wolf-type star beasts. Coincidentally, Wang Ting's spiritual power was indomitable. At this moment, the Gale Wolves were howling and roaring ferociously at him after they saw him killing their Wolf King. Hatred appeared in their eyes. They bared their fangs, eager to charge at him and bite him to death to take revenge for their king. Wang Ting wasn't afraid. A green light flashed in his eyes, and spiritual power flowed out. Wolf King Reign. The Gale Wolves in the area froze. Thereafter, the weaker ones lowered their heads and grunted in low tones to show their submissiveness to Wang Ting. Only a few 6-star Gale Wolves didn't get influenced by him. They hesitated for a moment and slowly stepped back, wishing to escape. Wang Ting wouldn't let them leave, though. He increased the spiritual power he had placed on the Wolf King Reign. Grunt. The 6-star Gale Wolves lowered their heads instantly. They didn't dare to move anymore. What's going on? Everyone was baffled when they saw this scene. Chapter 434. This leader is not bad. A strange and bemused scene appeared in the forest. A pack of Gale Wolves was bowing to a human. They seemed to be expressing their submission. What on earth was going on? Everyone was bewildered, feeling at a loss. A figure walked over and glanced at the Wolf King on the ground. She then looked at Wang Ting in confusion and asked, "What did you do?" Wang Ting glanced at the other party and immediately recognized her. She was the 7-star soldier-level martial warrior from earlier. He remembered how she hastened him continuously in a harsh tone, so he looked at her coldly and replied to her in an indifferent tone, "Please use your brain next time. It's useless to charge without an aim. Don't you know that you should capture the boss if you want to destroy the entire gang?" You. Xie Shueya felt her chest hurting from anger. Wang Ting ignored her. The Wolf King is dead. The wolf pack isn't a threat anymore. Everyone exchanged glances with one another and heaved a sigh of relief in their hearts. However, they still kept their distance from the Gale Wolves to prevent provoking them again. Leader, Ice Wind, Black Widow, and the rest of his team hurried over. They saluted and stood behind him. "Is anyone injured?" Wang Ting asked. "Only 5 of us suffered small injuries. It isn't a big deal. The rest of us have exhausted too much force, so we need some time to recuperate." Ice Wind summarized the situation. Wang Ting nodded. Well, rest here so that you can restore your force. Yes, sir, everyone replied. These Dan pills have better medicinal effects. Distribute them to the injured soldiers. Wang Teng took out 2 bottles of healing medicine from his space ring and tossed them to Ice Wind. We've all prepared our own healing medicine. Wang Teng stopped him before he could continue. Open it first. Ice Wind opened the bottle cap curiously. When he smelled the fragrance of the Dan, his expression changed. Let me thank you on their behalf, Ice Wind said sincerely. Quickly, stop dawdling. If you waste my time, I'll hold you responsible. Wang Teng smiled as he scolded him. Ice Wind also smiled under the mask. He made his move and hurriedly distributed the Dan medicines to the injured soldiers. Black Widow, who was behind him, glanced at Wang Teng after hearing their conversation. This leader is not bad. Before this, they accepted Wang Teng because of his ability. Now, they followed him because they felt something different. Wang Teng didn't know what they were thinking. He just didn't want to waste too much time. He sat down cross-legged under a big tree and scanned the surroundings with his spiritual power. The attribute bubbles dropped during the battle just now flew towards him. Wind Force *30 Wind Force *15 blank attribute *30 Earth Force *10 Wood Force *25 Wind Force *36 Spirit *15 Wang Teng's greatest gain was the Wind Force and blank attributes from the Gale Wolves. There were relatively fewer of the other forces. In total, he received 632 points of Wind Force and 560 blank attributes. Wind Force, 1356 3000, 5-star, blank attribute, 5020 Wang Teng's Wind Force was still at 5-star, but the number had increased. He was getting closer to the 6-star level. But he still found it a little slow. Wind Force wasn't commonly seen. He glanced at the Gale Wolves around him unconsciously as this thought entered his mind. If he killed all the Gale Wolves, he should be able to harvest another round of Wind Forces. Would it be enough for him to advance to the 6-star soldier level? The Gale Wolves suddenly shivered. The hairs on their bodies stood up as if they had felt a strong killing intent engulfing them. The 6-star Gale Wolves looked around them vigilantly. Who is it? Which bastard is eyeing us? Wang Teng coughed awkwardly. He threw this thought out of his mind and waved at the 6-star Gale Wolves. The Gale Wolves hesitated for a moment before they lowered their heads and strutted towards him. Leader. Black Widow stood up, her eyes focused on the Gale Wolves. Don't worry. Don't be so nervous. Sit back. Wang Teng waved his hand. Black Widow remembered how the Gale Wolves had bowed to Wang Teng. She pondered for a moment and took a step back. However, she was still on her guard in case the wolves attacked Wang Teng. The Gale Wolves seemed to sense the enmity from Black Widow and the other soldiers. They glanced at the human martial warriors, but due to Wang Teng's Wolf King reign, they didn't attack them. They arrived in front of Wang Teng obediently and squatted down. Wang Teng stroked the head of a Gale Wolf. The texture is not bad. If he didn't get the Wolf King reign, if these Gale Wolves weren't useful for his future plans, he might have slapped them to death. Black Widow was startled when she saw how obedient the Gale Wolves were. She couldn't control her curiosity and asked, Leader, how did you do it? Wise, amazing, and outstanding. It's only natural that these Gale Wolves will submit to me after seeing me. They have decided that they will follow me from now on. Wang Teng started spouting nonsense in a righteous tone. Black Widow rolled her eyes. She never knew that her leader was such a shameless person. You don't believe me? You can ask it yourself. Wang Teng pointed at the Gale Wolf in front. The Gale Wolf stared at him absent-mindedly. What do I know? Hurry up and tell her whether you think him wise, amazing, and outstanding. Wang Teng glared at the wolf. Howl. The Gale Wolf immediately got frightened. Its furry ears drooped as it nodded instantly. Black Widow. Childish. Why are you threatening a wolf? Xieshuia walked over and said with disdain, if I'm not wrong, they temporarily bowed to you because you killed the Wolf King. After some time, they will naturally run back into the forest. So, at least they listen to me now. Wang Teng didn't explain himself. He just sniggered in delight. Anyway, he loved how these people came up with their own stories. He didn't need to give them any explanations, and they would find excuses for him instead. That simplified matters. Xie Shuiya looked at the obedient Gale Wolf in front of Wang Ting and felt envious. However, she didn't show it. She scoffed. "Which troop are you?" "What troop?" "We're free martial warriors. We don't belong to any troop." Wang Ting played dumb. Xie Zuiya's face turned black. Did he think she was an idiot? She immediately took out a token and threw it to Wang Ting. "We're from Star Universe Troop. You can believe me now." Wang Ting flipped the token and threw it to Black Widow. After she nodded, he said, "May I know what you want?" Xie Shuiya noticed that he still didn't admit his identity, but she didn't dawdle over it. When she spoke again, her voice was soft, as if she was embarrassed. Many of my men are injured. I saw that your healing Dan has better effects. Can you lend me some?" "Oh." Wang Ting emphasized his reply. He smiled at her ambiguously and asked, "So you're here to borrow some Dan from me? However, you were so fierce just now. Why should I give them to you?" Chapter 435. So it's not enough. I need to add money. Xie Shuiya didn't expect Wang Ting to be so straightforward. He didn't give her any leeway at all. Her expression froze instantly. "What do you want?" "I don't want anything. I just don't like your attitude." Wang Ting smiled. "As a man, how can you be so narrow-minded?" Xie Shuiya raged. Wang Ting didn't mind. He found a comfortable position and leaned against the Gale Wolf. He said light-heartedly, "You're right. I am narrow-minded. Who says that a man can't be narrow-minded? You're shameless." Xie Shuiya glared at Wang Ting. She was born with a silver spoon, so she had never experienced such a treatment before. Wang Ting glanced at her in surprise. He smiled and said, "Wow, you know me well. You've pointed out another one of my merits." Xie Shuiya was speechless. Helplessness wafted into her heart as she looked at Wang Ting. At this moment, Wang Ting took out a bottle of healing medicine. He opened the cap and allowed the fragrance of the herbs to spread out. Then, he sniffed the air and gave an irritating and mesmerized expression. "This smells so good." Xie Zuiya's expression turned ugly. She wanted to press this young man on the ground and beat him up. However, she knew that she couldn't do it. She couldn't anger Wang Ting anymore when she remembered her injured subordinates. She could use normal healing medicine, but their effect couldn't be compared to Wang Ting's dance. She had observed his men just now. The wounds of those who consumed the dance were almost healed by now. She knew that only the high-class dance made from advanced-stage alchemists had this effect. Normal healing dance were nothing compared to them. She must recover the strength of her team as much as she could for the war in Star Maple City later. With the current state of her subordinates, they wouldn't be of much help even if they rushed to Star Maple City. This wasn't what she wanted. Xie Shuiya wanted to perform well during the battle. She wasn't willing to give up so easily. Hence, the healing medicine in Wang Ting's hand was her only hope. She gritted her teeth and murmured, "I'm sorry." Wang Ting was startled. Based on her previous actions, it wasn't hard to see that this young lady was an arrogant and demanding person. People like her rarely lowered their heads. Yet, she apologized. Wang Ting looked at her with interest. He twirled his pupils and said, "You've already apologized, so it will seem unreasonable if I hoard onto it." "Really?" Xie Shuiya was delighted. She was expecting him to make things difficult for her, but Wang Ting let her off so easily. She continued hurriedly, "Are you willing to lend me the healing medicine?" "Of course. I always mean what I say." Wang Ting nodded. Xie Shuiya was touched. This fellow wasn't that evil. But what? Xie Zuiya's heart stopped beating again. "But I only have a limited number of healing dons on me. I prepared it for myself and the people around me, so if I lend them to you, there might not be enough for me." Wang Ting pretended to be in a dilemma. Xie Shuiya hesitated. She knew that Wang Ting's worry was reasonable. However, she needed those healing medicines badly. "Also, you should know that the effects of my healing dance are many times better than normal healing medicine. I spent a lot of time and money on them," Wang Ting continued. Ice Wind and Black Widow felt strange after hearing what he said. For some reason, there seemed to be a hidden meaning behind his words. Xie Shuya wasn't stupid. She understood Wang Ting's intention. He was trying to rob her. This bastard. To think she took him as a generous person. Now, it looked like she was thinking too much. Tell me directly. What do I have to do to let you give me the medicine? Xie Shuya suppressed her anger forcefully and snorted. That'll depend on the price you're willing to give. Wang Ting smiled and replied. I'll buy your healing medicine at twice the market price. However, I don't have that many force stones on me. I'll pay you back when we reach Star Maple City. Xie Shuya gritted her teeth and said. So your subordinates are only worth this much in your heart? Wang Ting shook his head. Don't be outrageous. Xie Zueya's face turned black. This bastard was evil. He wanted to loot a burning house, but he made it sound so righteous. He even brought out her subordinates to condemn her. Despicable. Am I wrong? You aren't even willing to fork out this little money. What right do you have to be their leader? Indifferent. I'm extremely generous to my men. I give them expensive dans without batting an eyelid, Wang Ting said confidently. Ice Wind and Black Widow knew that Wang Ting was teasing Xie Shuya, but when they heard him praising himself, their faces turned warm. They felt embarrassed. 3 times. The muscles on Xie Zueya's face twitched as she called out in anger. Wang Ting shook his head and sighed. You can't bear to part with your money even in the face of life and death. Your subordinates are hurt quite badly. If they go on the battlefield like this, their survival rate will be less than 30%. Xie Shuya felt that she was going crazy. Why did she meet such a treacherous and scheming fellow? 4 times. Why are you so impatient? I'm sure you want to achieve something in Star Maple City, right? Wang Ting looked at her with a meaningful gaze. He took out a few bottles of healing medicine and laid them out in a row. At this crucial moment, Ice Wind and Black Widow wanted to stop him. They had witnessed the healing effect of this medicine, so they didn't want it to land in the hands of outsiders. Mind you, on the battlefield, these Dan medicines could save a life. The other party was unrelated to them. No matter what high price she offered, they felt that it wasn't worth selling it. However, these healing dans belonged to Wang Ting, so they had no right to say anything. They could only smile bitterly in their hearts. Xie Shuya thought that he had agreed to the deal. She beamed with joy and stretched her hand out to take the bottles. Bang! Wang Ting slapped her hand away. What are you doing? I'm not done yet. The back of her hands turned red. Xie Shuya rubbed her hand and gasped in pain. This bastard was vicious. She complained, I've already given you 4 times the price. What else do you want? Young miss, think big. What's 4 times when you compare these Dan medicines with military exploits? It's really not enough. You need to add money. Xie Shuya took a deep breath and gradually calmed down. She knew that she would have to fork out a huge sum of money today, so she said coldly, stop beating around the bush. How much are you willing to sell me? Cough. Wang Ting coughed and scratched the mask on his face. He said, well, at least 10 times the price. Gasp. Exclamations were heard all around him. This young man was too ruthless. 10 times the price. Where did he get the guts to say that? Everyone stared at Wang Ting in astonishment. Even Ice Wind and Black Widow, who felt that the healing medicine was extremely important and shouldn't be given to others, felt that 10 times the price was atrocious. 10 times. Xie Zueya's eyes widened in shock. She cried out in alarm, why don't you just rob me? She looked at Wang Ting's cat mask. It was a little cute, but to her, it looked like a devil now. It's all right if you don't want it. I won't force you. Wang Ting wanted to keep the bottles. Wait. Xie Shuya stopped him anxiously. Under Wang Ting's gaze, she said hesitantly, can't it be cheaper? 10 times is too much. No. Wang Ting shook his head indifferently. Xie Shuya sensed no chance of bargaining from Wang Ting's tone. She was left with no choice. She gritted her teeth and said, all right, 10 times. Well then, sign this. Wang Ting took out a piece of white paper and a pen from his space ring and placed them in front of her. Sign what? Xie Shueya was puzzled. Weren't they talking about a transaction? Why did he ask her to sign suddenly? This young miss seems stupid. Wang Teng gave her a "Are you an idiot?" look and said impatiently, "My healing medicine is precious. You can't just agree verbally. What if you turn your back on me? You need to sign this IOU. In the young miss, Wang Ting's gaze made her uncomfortable. She turned angry from embarrassment. However, she stopped herself halfway and sneered, "You're doubting my sincerity and questioning my morals." She grabbed the paper and wrote 2 lines on it. Then, she signed her name. She wiped her thumb on her wound, staining it with blood. She pressed it on the paper forcefully. "Take it. That's right. Putting it on paper is the safest way." Wang Teng looked at the content of the IOU and nodded his head in satisfaction. "Xie Shueya, your name's not bad." He didn't say the next part of the sentence. "You're just a little stupid." Xie Shueya didn't want to speak to him anymore. She took the medication and walked away furiously. She returned to her subordinates and distributed the healing medicine immediately. "Is this that healing medicine?" "Indeed, the effects are amazing." The soldiers were elated after they ate the dance and felt the changes to their injuries. Xie Shueya heaved a sigh of relief. The medicine was a little expensive, but the effects were real. A smile appeared at the edge of her lips. It was a relieved smile, as well as the smile of a poor woman. It was seriously expensive. After Xie Shueya walked away, Icewind asked, "The Star Universe troop belongs to the Xingwu continent. Will they become hostile to us because of this?" "Don't worry. The higher authorities will not bother about such small matters," Wang Teng replied calmly. "Sir, I don't think you're a stingy person." "Why did you treat her that way?" Black Widow asked curiously. "The world is a cruel place. It's not hard to tell that that young lady comes from an elite family. She doesn't have much experience and speaks rashly. If I don't teach her a lesson, she will cause trouble in the future." Wang Teng smiled. "Also, don't you think it's fun to tease her?" "Sir, I didn't know you had such a hobby," Icewind said helplessly. "What are you saying? Do I look like that kind of person? I'm doing it for her sake." Wang Teng glared at him. After resting for half an hour, Wang Teng got up and gathered everyone. "It's time to leave." "Yes, sir," replied everyone. "Time is tight. I'm not sure if we can arrive before the allocated time." Icewind frowned. "We will," Wang Teng replied firmly. He looked at the gale wolves around him. The gale wolves stood up and howled. "Get on the horses, wolves," Wang Teng shouted. He took the lead and leaped onto a 6-star gale wolf. These gale wolves were all half as tall as a human. They were large, so they could be used as their mounts. Also, they were fast. They were the best candidates to zoom through the forest. The other martial warriors were enlightened. With the help of these gale wolves, they might be able to reach the city before the deadline. Icewind and Black Widow scanned the wolves. The 6-star gale wolves were staring at them maliciously, so they took a step back and chose 5-star gale wolves to sit on. The gale wolves roared in a low tone. They seemed unwilling, but under Wang Teng's Wolf King reign, they remained obedient and didn't resist. The other martial warriors were in a dilemma. However, when they saw this scene, they stopped hesitating and climbed onto the backs of the gale wolves. "Let's go," Wang Teng ordered. The gale wolves shot out. Wind force enveloped their bodies as they galloped at the speed of the wind and turned into lingering shadows in the night sky. In the distance, Xie Shueya looked at them enviously. That bastard had many incredible tricks up his sleeve. Actually, she wanted to ask Wang Teng to bring them along, but she threw this idea away when she recalled his methods. She couldn't afford to give him any more money. "Never mind, it's all right to be a little late. Leader, there are many lone gale wolves. Why didn't you ask them to bring us along?" One of her subordinates touched her tender spot. "Xie Shueya. Leader, you must have a good relationship with their leader, right? They even lent us these precious medicines," another of her subordinates said. "That's right. Their leader is a kind person. He saved us and lent us his dance." Xie Shueya felt the corners of her lips twitch. To hell with a kind person. That was a wolf in sheep's clothing. Outside Star Maple City. In a certain part of the forest. Dawn was arriving, and the sky was at its darkest. Kong Li and Yuan Xian had already arrived and gathered at the prearranged location. Did you have a smooth journey? Niu Li asked. Everything is good on my side. We didn't encounter any trouble. Kong Li shrugged. Me too, Yuan Xian replied. Niu Li nodded. Just as he was about to say something, a figure landed from the sky. Niu Li and the others were stunned when they saw the person's face. They saluted hurriedly and greeted with respect, Chief Commander. This person was Dan Taishen. She nodded and scanned the crowd. Then, she frowned and asked, "Where is Wang Ting?" "He hasn't arrived yet," Niu Li said. "That fellow is late. Where did he run to this time?" Dan Taishen wondered curiously. Everyone was speechless. No matter how cheeky Wang Ting was, he wouldn't fool around at this important juncture. The chief commander didn't seem to trust her disciple very much. "Huh!" Dan Taishen exclaimed softly. She turned and looked at the left side of the forest. Chapter 436, Green with Envy. Niu Li and the others were confused when they saw Dan Taishen staring into the depths of the pitch-black forest suddenly. They turned to take a look too. But they didn't see anything. The three of them exchanged glances with one another. Niu Li asked cautiously, "Chief Commander, did something happen?" They would have been on alert when they noticed anything amiss. However, since Dan Taishen was here, they chose to ask her first. Of course, they would have to sense the danger first. "That brat is here." Dan Taishen smiled. "Wang Ting." The three officers understood instantly. The chief commander would only call one person like that. It was Wang Ting. No one else had this treatment. Yuan Xian was full of jealousy. Dan Taishen stopped talking. She placed her hands behind her back and waited quietly. Niu Li and the others waited for a moment, but there was still no sight of Wang Ting. They were astounded. Their chief commander was able to sense Wang Ting at such a distance. Was this how frighteningly powerful a general stage martial warrior was? At this moment, the sound of strong winds echoed from the depth of the forest. A gale blew against their faces. Where did this wind come from? Yuan Xian frowned. Then he felt something and his expression changed. This isn't right. Kong Li and Niu Li felt it too. Suddenly, the sound of air getting compressed was heard, rapidly closing on them. It was extremely faint, so they might not have discovered it if they weren't powerful enough. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The next moment, countless green lights lit up in the forest. Many shadows broke free from the darkness and landed quietly in front of everyone. Gale wolves. Niu Li and the others widened their eyes in surprise. They saw something unbelievable and were awestruck. More than 100 lofty wolves were scattered around them, exuding a ruthless vibe. They glanced around them with blood-curdling gazes. It wasn't hard to tell that they weren't kind wolves. The military martial warriors went on guard upon witnessing this scene. If there weren't people wearing masks sitting on some of the gale wolves, they might have attacked them already. "Huh! Everyone is here." A voice broke the silence. Wang Ting. Niu Li and the others regained their senses and looked at the person who spoke. "What is going on? Where did these gale wolves come from? You managed to tame them." Kong Li was dumbstruck. She bombarded Wang Ting with a series of questions. Yuan Xian's eyes were filled with bewilderment too. His pupils twirled furiously in his eyes as he looked at Wang Ting. "You asked so many questions. Which one should I answer first?" Wang Ting wasn't expecting this huge reaction from them. He seemed to have made quite a splash. "One all right, stop standing there. You're the slowest. Get over here quickly," Dan Taishen barked. "Master, why are you here?" Wang Ting was startled. He hurriedly climbed down the gale wolf and ran over obediently. "Nonsense, if I don't come, who are you going to take your orders from?" Dan Taishen glared at Wang Ting. "So, what happened? Where did you get this pack of gale wolves?" She was stunned too. Mind you, it was extremely difficult to tame wild beasts, especially adult wild beasts. They possessed intelligence and were stubbornly arrogant. It was almost impossible to train and tame them. However, Wang Ting managed to bring this huge bunch of gale wolves back, and from the looks of it, they listened to him well. But as the chief commander of a troop and Wang Ting's master, she needed to maintain the poise of a master and the demeanor of an elder. She mustn't get surprised so easily. She must hold it in. Oh, this is what happened. Wang Ting immediately told them what he met on his way here. In the end, he concluded, these gale wolves might have recognized me as their new wolf king because I killed the previous one. Kong Li and the others perked up their ears and listened. After Wang Ting finished speaking, their expressions turned strange. Why was this fellow able to meet such events all the time? He was so lucky. This was a normal traveling mission, but he managed to abduct a pack of wolves back. Why couldn't they encounter such good things? However, they also knew how difficult it was to kill the Wolf King when there was a huge pack of wolves attacking them. If they were in Wang Ting's situation, they might have fled. Moreover, Wang Ting's team had remained unscathed. This was another level of difficulty. They admitted that they would be unable to achieve the same feat. Was this fellow really so strong? It was hard to see through him. You're lucky. Dan Taixian glanced at Wang Ting meaningfully. Only she knew whether she believed him or not. Wang Ting felt a little guilty by her gaze. He manufactured an innocent expression and met Dan Taixian's eyes with a naive look. He was an Oscar winner now. Dan Taixian felt her hair standing. She lowered her head speechlessly. What kind of weird disciple did she take in? She glared at Wang Ting before saying, "You did well by saving the soldiers from Star Universe Troop. The war is imminent. We can't afford to lose a single man." Wang Ting kept his expression and said seriously, "It's my duty." Dan Taixian nodded. She dropped this topic and asked, "What do you plan to do with the Gale Wolves?" "I plan to let the Gale Wolves collaborate with my subordinates, forming a Gale Wolves cavalry." "Master, what do you think?" Wang Ting replied. Ice Wind and the other subordinates were chuffed. No wonder Wang Ting asked them to familiarize themselves with the Gale Wolves quickly on their way here. He had this plan in mind all along. If they were to have a Gale Wolf as their mount, their strength on the battlefield would increase exponentially. This was a good thing. "It suits me fine," Dan Taixian replied. "Since the Gale Wolves listen to you, you can be the decision-maker." Wang Ting nodded. He spoke to his subordinates, "Get familiar with your wolves based on the current arrangement." "What about the remaining Gale Wolves?" Kong Li asked hopefully. Her eyes were shining. Niu Li and Yuan Xian looked at Wang Ting instantly. They were green with envy when they saw that he had a Gale Wolf as his mount. There were more than 100 Gale Wolves, so Wang Ting's team only used less than half of them. It wouldn't be too much to ask him to give them the rest of the wolves, right? They were on the same side. It made more sense to let them reap the benefits instead of giving them to another troop. The remaining Gale Wolves can be distributed evenly to the other 3 teams. Wang Ting smiled. "Of course, Senior Kong Li can choose first." "Ha ha, as expected of my beloved junior brother. I'll remember your kindness." Kong Li sniggered and glanced at Yuan Xian and Niu Li proudly. Then, she ordered her subordinates to claim their Gale Wolf. "This is unfair." Niu Li and Yuan Xian looked at Wang Ting bitterly. When they noticed his indifference, they turned and looked at Dan Taixian, hoping that their chief commander would administer justice. "I think it's all right. As a student from Huang Hai, we should help each other," Dan Taixian chirped. The 2 officers. Chapter 437, Dan Taixian feels different today. "Ha ha ha," Kong Li burst out laughing. Niu Li and Yuan Xian were on the brink of tears. They felt that they got abandoned by the entire world. In the end, they were the outsiders. How saddening. Wang Ting shook his head and smiled when he saw their expressions. "Come on, are you planning to snatch from a lady?" "Sigh, talk is cheap. You can make irresponsible remarks because your subordinates have already chosen their mount," Niu Li replied. "What can I do? I was the one who tamed the Gale Wolves." Wang Ting smirked. "All right, you can stay here and choose your mount slowly. Afterward, get familiar with the wolves. Don't leave before your mission comes. Keep hidden, and don't expose yourselves." "Wang Ting, follow me," Dan Taixian said. She rose into the air after she finished speaking. Where are we going? Wang Teng asked curiously as he chased after his master promptly. Niu Li and the others glanced at one another when they saw the two of them flying away. Their gazes were ambiguous. Looking at the direction, Chief Commander is bringing Wang Ting to Star Maple City, Niu Li said. She's giving favored treatment to Wang Ting. I'm so envious. I wish I could be Chief Commander's disciple, Kong Li complained. You're thinking too much. Yuan Shen sneered. Why can't I think about it? Kong Li glared at him. Chief Commander is our Huanghai's principal. I'm half her disciple too. TSK, I'm not going to waste my time with you. Hurry up and choose your Gale Wolves. We're still waiting for you. Yuan Shen scorned. Wang Ting followed Dan Taixian and asked, Are we going to Star Maple City? Just follow me. Why are you asking so much? Dan Taixian glanced at him. Suddenly, she smiled. Your mask is not bad. Don't let me find out who played this bad joke on me. If not, Wang Ting got angry the moment he remembered the mask. If not, Dan Taixian smiled at him ambiguously. Master, are you the one who found this mask? Wang Ting asked curiously, his heart skipping a beat. Of course. Dan Taixian nodded and admitted it directly. I specially designed this for my beloved disciple, but you're so ungrateful. This is depressing. Wang Ting stared at Dan Taixian in shock. In the past, he would never have imagined that Dan Taixian had designed this mask. How bored are you? You're a chief commander, but you went to design a mask. Seriously? Also, what do you mean by beloved disciple? Wasn't he always the good-for-nothing? When did he advance to become her beloved disciple? Did he hold such an important position in her heart? He felt so overwhelmed by the flattery and honor that a chill went up to his spine. Wang Ting took a few steps back and asked carefully, Can you speak properly? Go away. Anyway, Master, how did you know I would get this mask? Wang Ting asked. Because you're my beloved disciple. I believed that you would choose the strongest team, Dan Taixian said blatantly. Can you not call me your beloved disciple? I feel scared. Wang Ting was in a dilemma. Have I been too gentle recently? Dan Taixian squinted, a dangerous gaze shooting out of her eyes. Actually, I'm thankful for your trust, Wang Ting said weakly. That's more like it. All you need to do is to accept the gift your master gave you, my beloved disciple. Dan Taixian nodded in satisfaction. Wang Ting laughed awkwardly. He could feel his blood running cold. There was something wrong with Dan Taixian today. She kept calling him her beloved disciple. Was she preparing to kill him and change to a new disciple because she didn't like him anymore? Maybe she was being sarcastic. That's right, that must be it. Master is an evil person. Wang Ting let his thoughts run wild. He felt uneasy. This was so scary. After some time, a city appeared in front of them. Dan Taixian hid her presence, so no one detected her. She landed in the city with Wang Ting. The environment in the city was different from what Wang Ting expected. It was exceptionally calm. It seemed no different from a typical day. Do you find it weird? Dan Taixian smiled and asked. A little. Wang Ting nodded. It's nothing. Until the last moment, everything inside the city will run as usual, Dan Taixian explained. Wang Ting guessed the reason. They had been cautious all this while. Even when they entered the city, Dan Taixian hid her aura. She was afraid of alerting the dark apparitions. It might seem impossible that dark apparitions could appear here, but they would have other ways of collecting information within the city. Let's go. I'll bring you to meet a few people, Dan Taixian said. Who? Wang Ting asked. You'll know once you see them. My lovely disciple, please don't embarrass your master. Dan Taixian smiled. If not, you're dead. Wang Ting. It's here, it's here. As expected, she had a motive. Don't worry, I'll perform well and not embarrass you. Wang Ting nodded firmly. That's good. Dan Taixian smiled and rubbed the back of his head. Wang Ting shuddered, his head turning numb. This is frightening. The layout of Star Maple City adopted the classic military style. However, It was different from Black Sparrow City and Crimson Tiger City. The architecture of the buildings had the influence of the Xingwu continent. However, it seemed to have referred to Earth's military cities for their layout. You could faintly see the shadow of the other military cities here. The Xingwu continent had also been influenced by Earth over the years. The two of them passed through many streets and finally arrived at a 3-level octagon tower in the middle of the city. This is the central command center of Star Maple City, Dan Taixian introduced nonchalantly. Wang Ting raised his head. This building was interesting. They stepped into the building. The guards at the side recognized Dan Taixian and placed their fists on their chest as they bowed to her slightly. This was the military salute of the Xingwu continent. Dan Taixian nodded. She brought Wang Ting all the way to the 3rd level. The moment they entered the lobby, they saw a huge model of Star Maple City placed in the middle of the room. The panorama layout of the city floated above the model. Many people were standing around the model, debating in loud voices. There were also a few people wearing black-red military uniforms standing at the side helplessly. When they saw Dan Taixian walking in, a refined-looking middle-aged man said, "Taixian, you're back." His eyes lit up when he saw her. "How's the situation?" Dan Taixian glanced at the people who were arguing. "There's no conclusion yet." The refined-looking man shook his head. Then, he noticed Wang Ting and asked in surprise, "This is?" "My disciple," Dan Taixian replied. Wang Ting wasn't interested in their conversation. Instead, all his attention was on the people who were quarreling. No, his attention was on the huge attribute bubbles beside them. Chapter 438, Accidentally Upgrade to Master Level. Rune Knowledge *88 Rune Knowledge *67 Spiritual Realm Spirit *30 Spiritual Realm Spirit *42 Rune Knowledge *101 Wang Ting was amazed. A second later, he beamed with joy and gradually became ecstatic. He cheered in his heart. He was rich. He looked at his attributes panel. It felt like an illusion. Runemaster +1 +1 +1 +1 +1. Within a few seconds, Wang Teng's Runemaster level soared through the roof and reached the upper limit of the advanced stage. Runemaster, 1000 advanced stage, all kinds of rune knowledge floated into Wang Teng's mind, and it felt swollen for a moment. As the rune knowledge merged into him, it gradually became part of his knowledge. The people hovering around the model were still arguing. As time passed, their voices were getting louder and louder. Torrents of words were hurled out of their mouths as they voiced their opinions. No one was convinced by the other. As they argued and glared at each other furiously, more attribute bubbles dropped out of their mouths. Wang Teng felt that they looked like elderly goldfish spurting bubbles. It was a funny scene. Rune Knowledge *36 Spiritual Realm Spirit *12 Rune Knowledge *20 Wang Teng immediately picked up the bubbles. His Runemaster level instantly broke through the advanced stage and reached the Master stage. Runemaster, 123,000, Master, did he accidentally upgrade to Master level? Wang Teng was surprised when his Runemaster level advanced. He felt blissful. He didn't expect to have such a massive gain after coming to this place with Dan Taixian. Besides the growth in his Runemaster level, his spirit attribute also increased tremendously. Not only that, all the spirit attributes were in the spiritual realm. None of them was a normal spirit attribute. Spirit, 568 1000, Emperor Realm. As Wang Ting's spirit attribute surged, a huge dragon seemed to be entrenched deep into his mind. Are these people all rune masters? Wang Ting was astounded. However, it was understandable. On such an important occasion, you would need the help of rune masters. As he was pondering to himself, Dan Taixuan's voice came into his ears. Wang Ting, this is General Yin Tongfang from Star Maple City. Wang Ting had only been picking attributes for a few seconds, even though it sounded very long. When he heard Dan Taixuan's introduction, he looked at the refined-looking and handsome man and saluted. General Yin. As expected of the disciple of a general. Your disciple is a fine-looking and extraordinary young man, Yin Tongfang smiled and said. Don't praise him. He's still far away from that, Dan Taixian replied. Wang Teng rolled his eyes. As expected, this was Dan Taixuan's true face. It was all an illusion when she called him her beloved disciple just now. Yin Tongfang smiled. He just took it as her being humble. From what he saw, Wang Teng was exceptional. He wasn't lying when he praised him. He changed the topic and brought the two of them into the room. He shook his head and said, "These rune masters rarely see each other in a year. Now that they are congregated in a room, they could destroy the building with their arguments. How can they still quarrel in a situation like this?" Dan Taixian was speechless. "What can we do? It's not easy to invite them. They are our bosses now." Yin Tongfang said helplessly, "I went to persuade them just now and got scolded." "Ha ha ha, it must be hard for you." Dan Taixian laughed. "Come, let me introduce everyone." Yin Tongfang brought Dan Taixian and Wang Ting to the people at the side and started introducing everyone. "General Dan, they just arrived, so you might not have seen them. This is General Ku Dian from Star Universe Troop. This is General Kuan Xiong from Giant Tree Troop." Wang Ting was in awe. These were all general stage bosses. Usually, it was hard to even meet one of them. Yet, there were around 7 of them here. General Kuan Xiong from the Giant Tree Troop must be a general stage giant race martial warrior from the Xingwu continent. He was exceptionally tall and lofty, about the same height as the 8 Arms Devil General. There was also the general from the Star Universe Troop here. He had provoked his subordinates earlier. If the general found out, would he send him flying with a slap? Wang Teng felt that he had broadened his horizons after seeing so many bosses. "This is Dan Taixian from the Black Sparrow Troop." Yin Tongfang solemnly presented Dan Taixian after introducing the local general stage martial warriors. He didn't introduce Wang Ting. No one asked either. After all, Wang Ting was just a small and unimportant figure. No matter how outstanding he was just a young man. He wasn't strong enough, so the formidable warriors wouldn't care about him. Yin Tongfang added, "We could make early preparations because Dan Taixuan's subordinate had brought back this important information. If not, the consequences would have been dreadful." Everyone had already taken notice of this beautiful lady with an exceptional aura. They were observing her secretly and guessing her identity. When they heard Yin Tongfang's words, they were shocked. "We must thank you. If it wasn't for your information, our empire would have suffered heavy losses and been put at a disadvantage," Ku Dian said. "No one would have thought that a dark apparition's spy had infiltrated the higher authorities of our troop," Kuan Xiong said with his deep and loud voice. "There's no need to thank me. Actually, I have to thank my disciple for getting the information." Dan Taixian pointed at Wang Teng beside her. If he hadn't snuck into the dark apparition's camp using his special method and overheard their plan, we wouldn't have been able to discover it. "Oh." They all turned to look at Wang Teng. Of course, they had already noticed this young man beside Dan Taixian. However, his ability wasn't eye-catching, so they didn't take much notice of him. Even though Dan Taixian specially gave Wang Teng the merits, they didn't take it to heart. How could a mere 7-star soldier-level martial warrior discover this important information? It must have used up much manpower from the Black Sparrow Troop. They thought that Dan Taixian was helping her disciple improve his reputation, so they didn't expose her. They smiled and said a few polite words and changed the topic. Dan Taixian knew what they were thinking, but she didn't explain. She introduced Wang Teng because she didn't want to take the credits for herself when she didn't do anything. She was just letting them know. She didn't care if they believed it or not, and she didn't have to explain herself either. After exchanging some greetings, Dan Taixian used voice transmission and asked Wang Teng, "Are you angry for getting belittled by them? It isn't a disgrace to get looked down on by general stage martial warriors, right?" Wang Teng glanced at Dan Taixian and replied to her calmly using voice transmission. "Tempage, do you have to be so mature all the time? A young man should be hot-blooded and arrogant." Dan Taixian rolled her eyes at him. Then, she pointed at the bunch of people on the other side with her chin. "Do you see those young people there? They are the disciples of some rune masters. We are planning to lay a huge rune array over Star Maple City. Remember to perform well. So this is why you brought me here." Wang Teng finally understood. Anyway, Why are you angry at a bunch of rune masters when you're a martial warrior? Those rune masters are extremely conceited. They say that we're just a group of physically strong soldiers with simple brains. I'm giving them face by not teaching them a lesson personally. Dan Taixian scoffed. What a huge grudge. Wang Ting glanced at Dan Taixian. He wondered how bold those people were to offend this young madam. No wonder Dan Taixian brought him here. She must have figured out his runemaster identity after what happened in Yang City, so she wanted him to trample those irritating young men. There was no ground for blame. The problem was, he was a master stage runemaster now, the same level as the young men's masters. Wasn't Dan Taixian asking him to bully them? Fortunately, he loved to bully people. He would agree immediately. When he thought of this, Wang Ting smiled and replied, "No problem. I promise that I will torment them until they question their lives." Dan Taixian was extremely satisfied. She patted Wang Ting's shoulder. As expected of my beloved disciple. Wang Ting felt weird whenever he heard Dan Taixian speaking those two words. However, he couldn't do anything to her, so he pretended he never heard it and asked, "There's so many rune masters here. Why didn't Master Gorlin come? There should be someone coming from Yang City." The moment she finished speaking, a group of people entered the room. She smiled and continued, "Look, they are here." Wang Ting's eyes lit up. He saw a few familiar figures in the crowd, one of them an old man with a white beard and hair. He immediately went forward and called out, "Master, Wang Ting." Gorlin beamed when he saw Wang Ting. "You're here too." "Yes, I joined a troop from Earth and came for a mission," Wang Ting said. "You must be careful." Gorlin seemed worried. "This battle might be worse than the one in Yang City." "Don't worry, it'll be fine," Wang Ting consoled him. "You seemed to have become more powerful." A voice was heard at the side. "Lord Yang. Principal Yang." Wang Ting greeted them. "How's Yang City?" The two of them nodded with smiles and replied, "We're still restoring the city. After some time, it will resume its prosperity." Suddenly, Wang Ting felt a gaze secretly landing on him. He turned and saw a pretty figure beside Lord Yang. "Princess. We meet again." A smile appeared on Li Rongshu's face immediately as she looked at him. Li Rongshu's appearance immediately attracted the attention of the young runemasters. Beautiful people would always be in the spotlight no matter where they went. Wang Ting couldn't bear Li Rongshu's gaze. He felt helpless. A handsome man had many troubles. "Lord Yang." Yin Tongfang walked over and saluted. Although they were both general stage martial warriors, Lord Yang's status was different. Even Yin Tongfang had to treat him with respect. "You're too polite." Lord Yang raised his hand. "You're late." Dan Taixian walked over with a smile. "It's Miss Dan." Lord Yang grinned. "We don't have a choice. There are many things to attend to in Yang City. I hurried over after handing over all the matters." "Lord Yang, this way, please," Yin Tongfang said. They entered the lobby and started exchanging amenities. Gorlin chatted with Wang Ting. It had been a while since they last saw each other. "Lingxian didn't come?" Wang Ting glanced around and asked. "That little girl wanted to come, but I stopped her." Gorlin smiled, likely thinking of something funny. Wang Ting could imagine Su Lingxuan's helpless and frustrated expression. He laughed and said, "Did she pull your beard? How dare she?" Gorlin widened his eyes while pretending to be angry. Everyone was puzzled when they saw this scene. Wang Ting was an earthling. Why was he so close to Gorlin? They didn't notice how Wang Ting greeted Gorlin before this. Gorlin seems to have a good relationship with Wang Ting, Yin Tongfang probed. His face was filled with surprise. "Wang Ting is Gorlin's disciple." Lord Yang smiled and answered. "Isn't he Chief Commander Dan's disciple?" Yin Tongfang glanced at Dan Taixian in astonishment and asked. "Im Wang Ting's martial arts master. Master Gorlin is his master in rune studies," Dan Taixian smiled and replied. Everyone was dumbfounded. It wasn't an easy feat to have two masters. Moreover, both his masters were formidable characters from two different worlds. Although the cooperation between the Xingwu continent and Earth had been getting closer recently, This was the first time such an event had occurred. There must be an important relationship here. Was there something special about Wang Ting? Lord Yang briefly explained Wang Ting's performance during the Yang City War. He verbally attacked a general stage dark apparition. He helped with the creation of the rune array that almost tormented the Eight-Arms Devil General to death. He helped Yang City overcome the crisis and was given the title of an honorary baron. Everyone felt enlightened and thunderstruck at the same time. They had heard of the Yang City War before, but they weren't clear on the details. They didn't know that Wang Ting had played a part too. Also, the higher authorities gave an earthling the title of an honorary baron. Even if it was just an honorary baron, its significance was extraordinary. Good Lord, this quiet young man did many astonishing things. At the same time, Yin Tongfang and the others suddenly remembered what Dan Taixian had told them just now. Did he really discover the dark apparition's plan alone and bring back the news? You might not know, but Wang Teng was the one who brought back the information this time. Yin Tongfang said with a bitter smile, "It looks like we were being judgmental." Oh! Lord Yang was startled. He glanced at Wang Teng and smiled. Ha ha ha, if this brat survives this ordeal, I'll ask His Majesty to record his meritorious deeds. Dan Taixuan's eyes lit up when she heard this. Wang Teng was already an honorary baron. If he climbed higher, he could become the bridge between Earth and the Xingwu continent. This was a hard-to-come-by good event for the two worlds. Wang Ting didn't know how deep Dan Taixian was thinking. Instead, he felt a little embarrassed by what Lord Yang and the others were saying about him. Did he perform a little too outstandingly? He was so dazzling that the general stage bosses couldn't help but praise him. Yes, that was right. That must be the case. Actually, I was just there at the right time, he said humbly. Even so, your merits are a fact. No one can deny it. Lord Yang waved his hands. Thank you, Wang Teng replied. Chapter 439, Using One City to Bury the Dark Apparitions. Li Rongxue stood among the crowd and looked at Wang Teng, who was chatting casually and confidently with the general stage formidable warriors. A different emotion appeared in her eyes. This fellow was truly surprising. They hadn't met for a short while, but he was still the same. He didn't change at all. Wang Teng was chatting with Lord Yang when he noticed a gaze from the corner of his eyes. His heart shuddered. Why is she looking at me with such a loving expression? He didn't do anything to Li Rongxue, right? Why was this lady being so troublesome suddenly? All kinds of thoughts appeared in Wang Teng's mind. However, he didn't reveal any of it on his face. He evaded Li Rongxue's gaze. The rune master arguing finally sensed Gorlin's arrival. They hurried over and shouted, "Master Gorlin, you came at the right time. We picked a few arrays but haven't chosen which one to use. What do you think we should choose?" "Those old fellows." Gorlin shook his head and said to Wang Ting, "Come, let's go and take a look." Wang Ting nodded and followed Gorlin over. "Why are you still arguing at this time? Don't you know how serious the situation is?" Gorlin frowned the moment he went up. "It's their fault. They refused to use the Waterfall Heaven array I chose," a fat old man complained. "Bullshit, the Waterfall Heaven array has a larger coverage area, but it isn't powerful enough. How can it give the dark apparitions a lethal blow?" Another balding, short elder with little hair glared at the old man. Wang Teng glanced at the short elder. His ears were pointed, and his face was covered with wrinkles. He had a long nose, along with a slightly sharp chin. He should be an elder from the goblin race. He seemed old, but his temper was huge. "Carl, stop complaining about old Chuz's array. Your Golden Ray Heavenlock array is good at pinning people, but it's not that powerful either. My Crimson Stormfire array is better than yours." Another runemaster joined the conversation. Seeing that they were about to start arguing again, Gorlin said hurriedly, all right, everyone, there's not much time. Let's sit down and discuss properly. Let's not waste time over these pointless arguments." The runemasters understood the situation, but this was precisely the reason why they were anxious. The more urgent the matter was, the more agitated they became, giving rise to more differing opinions. Gorlin was the oldest among them and had the highest accomplishments in rune mastery. He was at the entrance of the Grandmaster level already. Hence, the instant he opened his mouth, everyone took the opportunity to take a step back and stop this endless argument. Yin Tongfang and the other martial warriors heaved a sigh of relief when they saw this. "Everyone, please take a seat." Yin Tongfang guided them immediately. They all sat down around the large-scale model of the Star Maple City. The atmosphere turned tense and serious. The young men came over and stood beside their masters. Li Rongxue sat beside Lord Yang. As a princess, she enjoyed special treatment. Wang Ting glanced around him and understood his position. He knew that there was no seat for him, so he planned to stand behind Gorlin and observe the situation. Suddenly, Yin Tongfang said, "Wang Ting, you can sit beside Master Gorlin." The young men looked at him with a questioning gaze. There were envy and jealousy on their faces too. Why? Why was he able to sit down when they couldn't? They were from the same generation, right? Of course, they only dared to complain in their hearts. In front of all the big shots, they were too scared to open their mouths. Wang Ting ignored the gazes. Since Yin Tongfang said that he could sit, he sat down directly beside Gorlin. He became the second youth who was able to sit with powerful figures. Yin Tongfang placed the complete layout of the Star Maple in front of everyone and said, "We plan to abandon Star Maple City this time." Abandon Star Maple City? Wang Ting raised his eyebrows. He was stunned. "Hence, you can do whatever you want. Try your best to arrange the most powerful rune array." Yin Tongfang said coldly with a stern face, "We will use a city to bury the dark apparitions who dared to provoke us." Many people didn't know about this plan. Thus, when they heard it, they gasped in astonishment. How determined was the Xingwu continent this time to have decided to abandon an entire city? The rune masters turned serious, feeling a heavy burden landing on their shoulders. They looked at each other with bitter smiles. Yin Tongfang passed the stage to the rune masters after he finished his speech. He didn't speak again. The rune masters opened their mouths, but no words came out. In the end, they looked at Gorlin. The fat elder, Cha Shu, said, "Master Gorlin, you should lead the discussion." That's right, that's right. You should do it." The others agreed readily. Gorlin shook his head with a forced smile. "You're giving me a tall hat. All right, time is tight, so I won't decline the offer." He was extremely decisive. He didn't waste time on the issue and went directly into the topic. His gaze landed on the layout of Star Maple City as he said, "Since General Yin is allowing us to do whatever we want, let's go all out." "You mean, the Goblin Rune Master?" Carl asked. "Have you heard of?" Gorlin scanned the crowd before continuing slowly, "Thousand Thunder Annihilation Array?" Everyone turned silent. Cha Shu hesitated before replying, "Is it the array that is said to be able to destroy everything?" "The array that is known as the God of Lightning?" "That's right." Gorlin nodded. "Master is really going all out." Wang Ting glanced at Gorlin in bewilderment. He didn't expect his courtly master to have this side too. He knew the Thousand Thunder Annihilation Array. It used the strength of the runes and the help of lightning rods to conduct all the lightning in the sky. It was formidable enough to obliterate anything in its path. Wang Teng recalled how Ren Qingtsang used the Leitang physique and made use of the power of nature to throw lightning bolts at him. He had personally experienced how strong the impact was. However, honestly, it paled in comparison with the Thousand Thunder Annihilation Array. But this array had its cons too. The rune masters glanced at one another and smiled helplessly. "Master Gorlin, the Thousand Thunder Annihilation Array is indomitable, but it's extremely complicated. The success rate isn't high, yet we only have one chance." This was the disadvantage Wang Ting was thinking about. How confident was his master? "From what you've mentioned, the Thousand Thunder Annihilation Array is powerful, but the success rate is low," Yin Tongfang asked at this moment. "Yes. In terms of power, the Thousand Thunder Annihilation Array is the #1 array we can arrange based on our current ability," Cha Shu said. Yin Tongfang's eyes lit up. "Master Gorlin, how confident are you?" "With everyone's help, I'm only less than 60% confident, Gorlin said. This, Yin Tongfang was in a dilemma. Chapter 440. This stupid disciple only knew how to embarrass him in front of everyone. Less than 60% is a little low. Lord Yang frowned. He was hesitant too. One could see their determination to exterminate the dark apparitions. After all, they had decided to sacrifice an entire city. Hence, the array was extremely important. There must be no mistakes. Looking at the time, they only had one chance to lay the array. They couldn't change to another array easily if the Thousand Thunder Annihilation array failed. If that was possible, they wouldn't be in a dilemma now. Master Karl and the other rune masters were startled when they heard Gorlin's words. Then, they gave a bitter smile and said, "Actually, this isn't a low probability for the Thousand Thunder Annihilation array." They looked at Gorlin and sighed. As expected of Master Gorlin. You are able to have a high success rate even with such a difficult array. You're flattering me. I came up with this percentage after taking into consideration your help. If I do it alone, I'll only be 40% confident. Gorlin shook his head. Oh. Yin Tongfang and Lord Yang were surprised when they heard the other rune masters' high praises. The rune masters and the martial warriors were looking at the issue from two different perspectives, so their conclusion was also different. The rune masters focused on mastery. The martial warriors were the commanders, so they only cared about the success rate. Since the Thousand Thunder Annihilation array is so powerful, why don't we take a leap of faith and give it a try? Dan Taixian suggested. Yin Tongfang was still hesitant. We can have 2 strings to our bow. While everyone was hesitating, they heard a voice speaking slowly. They turned to look at Gorlin, and then at Wang Teng beside him. This was the young man who spoke just now. Many general stage martial warriors frowned. Honestly, they didn't have any impression of him even though Lord Yang and the others thought highly of him and praised him just now. Thus, when they heard him speaking at a moment like this, they felt that he was insensible. After all, at such an important event, any opinions could affect the final result. You needed to be extremely careful with your words. The disciples of the rune masters were flabbergasted. They turned to Wang Teng and complained in their hearts. This young lad is bold. Where did he get the guts to speak? Can't he see how serious the general stage martial warriors are and how tense the atmosphere is? However, they had to acknowledge his courage. Under such a huge and frightening pressure, he was still able to open his mouth and speak calmly. Unlike them. They didn't even dare to make a peep. No, they were just being sensible. Of course, many people were anticipating Wang Teng's response. For instance, Dan Taixian, Gorlin, and Lord Yang. Lord Yang looked at him with interest and smiled. Say it. We can have 2 arrays. Wang Ting scanned the crowd and continued indifferently, the Thousand Thunder Annihilation array will be the main array. Inside it, we can draw the Yi Wood Melting Fire array to complement it. At the start, the rune masters didn't take Wang Ting seriously. But toward the end, they felt mind blown. They went into deep thought. The martial warriors didn't know much about rune arrays, so they looked at the rune masters and waited for their reply. Noticing how lenient Lord Yang was towards young people, a young rune master said, "That isn't right. Based on my humble opinion, the Thousand Thunder Annihilation array is a thunder element array, while the Yi Wood Melting Fire array is a fire element array. These 2 arrays restrict each other instead of reinforcing each other. How can you use it as assistance? Also, creating an array in another array will increase the difficulty level. Isn't this putting the cart before the horse?" Wang Teng glanced in the direction where the voice came from. He saw a delicate young man with an extraordinary aura looking at him. He was dressed in rune master attire and was lean and skinny. When their eyes met, a hint of delight flashed past the young man's eyes. Wang Teng retracted his gaze and sniggered in his heart. He understood the young man's motive. He wanted to step on him and create an impression in the hearts of the powerful rune masters and formidable martial warriors. Young people were naturally competitive. However, if he was able to control his hands that were trembling because of his nervousness, the effects might have been better. Also, his knowledge of runes was lacking, so his rebuttal didn't hold water. Normally, Wang Teng wouldn't allow others to trample on him. However, this fellow was too weak. He couldn't even bother about him. Yin Tongfang and the other martial warriors were stunned once again. They glanced meaningfully at the two young men, but no one was in a hurry to open their mouths. They waited quietly for the rune masters to speak. Li Rongxue, who was sitting beside Lord Yang, gave Wang Ting a cheeky smile. Wang Ting shook his head. This young miss was enjoying the show without any concern over the consequences. The young man was filled with jealousy when he saw this. He opened his mouth and wanted to say something. "Shut up." A cold voice stopped him suddenly. "Master." The young man was dumbstruck. He looked at the elder in front of him absent-mindedly. The elder turned and glared at him with a black face. The young rune master was at a loss. "Don't speak if you don't know anything." The elder reprimanded him in a low voice. Then, he cupped his hands and apologized to everyone. "I'm sorry, I didn't teach my disciple properly. It's all right, it's all right. It's normal for a young man to make mistakes." "That's right, we used to be like this when we were young." The rune masters were secretly laughing at his plight, but on the front, they waved their hands and pretended to be magnanimous. The young man knew that he had just displayed his incompetence when he saw the reaction of his master and the other rune masters. He had just embarrassed himself. He turned red and wanted to dig a hole to bury himself. He couldn't bear to stand here anymore. However, he had already made a mistake. If he stepped out of the line again, the humiliation would be worse. He couldn't help but blame his master for not giving him face. Why did he have to reprimand him in front of so many people? He didn't know that his master had already recorded his mistake in his heart. This stupid disciple only knew how to embarrass him in front of everyone. However, the young rune master was still confused. He went through his rebuttal again and again in his mind but couldn't find his mistake. The Thousand Thunder Annihilation Array was a lightning element array, while the Yiwood Melting Fire Array was a fire element array. They were not related, so they couldn't merge. If they forcefully combined these two arrays, the difficulty would only be greater. But why were the rune masters and his master giving that expression? Was there something magnificent about Wang Ting's plan that he didn't notice? Chapter 441, Lightning Fire Double Array. The saddest thing in the world was, before your opponent spoke, you had already made a grand exit. The young rune master, Ni Wenguang, lowered his head. He didn't dare to look at other people. They must be mocking him. The other young rune masters glanced at Ni Wenguang happily. They felt fortunate that they didn't speak up. If not, they would be the ones getting embarrassed. Actually, besides the younger generation and Ni Wenguang's master, Master Dongguo, who planned to punish him after they went back, the other important figures didn't have the time to care about him. At this moment, Master Dongguo wanted to lighten the awkward atmosphere, so he said, "Master Gorlin's disciple is indeed exceptional. This is an ingenious solution. You're flattering him. However, I didn't expect him to be able to come up with this idea either." Gorlin remained humble, but he was beaming with happiness. Yiwood Melting Fire Array. Master Gorlin, your disciple's rune knowledge must be profound. It's not easy to find a complementary array for the Thousand Thunder Annihilation Array among the millions of arrays present. Master Carl shook his head and commented. When lightning strikes trees, trees will light up in flames. Your disciple extrapolated this in the arrays. Has not bound by the appearance of the arrays. This is a rare and valuable trait, Cha Shu praised. That's right. My disciple only looked at the appearance of the arrays and thought that they couldn't merge. Actually, the Yiwood Melting Fire Array uses the wood force in its surroundings to stir up the fire force that powers up the array. Hence, it is linked to the Thousand Thunder Annihilation Array. We won't need to worry about them conflicting with each other if we add some assisting runes in, Master Dongguo said. Fat. Ni Wenguang felt a stab in his heart once again. He almost vomited blood. He finally understood what the problem was. He had truly embarrassed himself. He gave a regretful look. At the same time, he was amazed. How did Wang Ting come up with this ingenious plan? How high was his talent? Mind you, even the masters didn't think of it. No one bothered about him. Shu continued, after linking these two arrays, the operation of the Yi-Wood melting fire array won't be affected even if the Thousand Thunder annihilation array failed. But if both of them work, it will be magnificent. He got more excited as he spoke, his facial features dancing happily. Both arrays will activate at the same time. The combined forces of lightning and fire won't just double the effect. At that time, we don't have to worry about annihilating the dark apparitions anymore. He wasn't the only one feeling amazed. Even Karl and the other rune masters found this plan remarkable. The other rune masters who never spoke became extremely interested and attracted by the ingenuity of this solution. They praised it continuously and joined the discussion. The martial warriors exchanged glances with one another and then looked at Wang Teng beside Gorlin. This young man seemed to have given a constructive suggestion. Li Rongshu's shining eyes landed on him. No one knew what she was thinking. On the other hand, Dan Taixian wasn't that happy, her face downcast. At first, she had dragged Wang Teng here to boost her pride. He did boost someone's pride, but it was Master Gorlin's. How infuriating. As the main lead, Wang Teng felt helpless. When these rune masters started discussing, they threw him to the side. As expected, these were a bunch of old kids who only loved runes. Fortunately, Wang Teng didn't mind. He didn't come up with the plan to gain a reputation. He just wanted to kill more dark apparitions. Of course, he didn't mind gaining more reputation if he could. Yin Tongfang coughed helplessly when he saw the rune masters getting carried away with their discussion. He asked, "Is this idea possible?" The rune masters immediately stopped talking and nodded. "Yes, that's right. It's 100% possible. No problem. I think we can start working right away." Yin Tongfang and Lord Yang were elated. They immediately made the decision. "All right, we will hand this matter over to you." "We won't hesitate to," the rune masters replied simultaneously. "Also, I suggest having Master Gorlin as the chief commander of the construction of the rune array," Master Shu proposed. "I can't do that. I think we can form the array together. There's no need for a chief commander." Gorlin waved his hands hurriedly. It was always hard to be the first in the world of runes. Gorlin didn't want to step into the muddy waters. No, without a chief commander, we'll probably start quarreling again. It will be a waste of time. Master Karl shook his head. He understood his personality. Gorlin gave a forced smile. "It's good that you know what you're like." Even if he was the chief commander, they would still argue. This was a troublesome matter. Gorlin didn't want to be the mediator. He still wanted to reject the offer, but the other rune masters started speaking up. "Master Gorlin, please don't reject it. There are too many of us. We need someone in command. I have no objections to you being the leader." "That's right. I have no objections either." "We'll have to trouble Master Gorlin then," Lord Yang smiled and said. Gorlin sighed. Since Lord Yang had asked him personally, he couldn't reject it anymore. He nodded with resolution and said, "All right, I'll accept it." Then, he teased himself, "I'm afraid that I might cut short my lifespan after forming these two arrays." Ha ha ha. Everyone burst out laughing. "I'll ask His Majesty to record your meritorious deeds after this battle ends. I'll also ask His Majesty for some longevity spiritual herbs for Master Gorlin to make dans." Lord Yang laughed along. "I don't deserve such divine herbs." Gorlin shook his head. Everyone laughed and chatted for some time, the atmosphere easing up a little. After that, the intense preparation work for the rune array started. More work was needed to form two arrays, but time was extremely tight. All the rune masters left the central command building and started surveying the site to choose the spot for the lightning rods. On the surface, Star Maple City seemed normal. But it had already entered an emergency alert state. No suspicious person could enter the city anymore. The rune masters didn't cause any commotion either. Everything was done secretly to prevent any unwanted attention. The rune masters finally settled on the spots for the 12 lightning rods. Then, the blacksmiths started forging the rods fervently. The rune masters weren't the only ones who came. The blacksmiths and the alchemists came too. They were all preparing for the war secretly. Wang Ting followed Gorlin to a huge underground smithery room in Star Maple City. The moment they came out of the lift, heat waves splashed against their bodies. Loud clangs shook their eardrums without stopping. Chapter 442. Forging Lightning Rods. Forging lightning rods was the first step to creating the Thousand Thunder Annihilation Array. It was an important step too. When making the lightning rods, both the blacksmith and the rune master must be present. The rune masters would carve the runes on the rod when it was almost completed. Master Gorlin and the other rune masters came to the underground smithery room for this. Wang Ting followed them out of the lift and walked towards the knocking sounds and heat waves. The other younger generations didn't come. Wang Ting had come up with the lightning fire double array and gained recognition for his rune mastery. That was why he was allowed to come and observe. As they came closer, the temperature became higher. After some time, a breathtaking scene appeared in front of Wang Ting's eyes. Lava flowed on the ground, and fire rose into the air. Many pillars more than 10 meters tall and 1 meter in diameter were suspended in the air by black chains. They were red from all the burning. Muscular figures stood on the scorching hot round pillars and knocked the pillars continuously with the giant hammers in their hands. Sparks flew everywhere. The figures were perspiring profusely. They bathed in the flames as they forged, seemingly unafraid of the heat. Down. Suddenly, a deep and strong voice echoed in the room. A person standing on one of the pillars leaped down. The round pillar plunged straight into the lava below, along with the clanging of the chains. Slash. Fire spurted straight to the roof. Impressive. They must be master-level blacksmiths. Wang Ting was lost in wonder. As he gasped emotionally, his gaze was attracted by the attribute bubbles around the blacksmiths. He picked them up. All the attribute bubbles flew into his arms. Smithery *68 Smithery *102 Spiritual Realm Spirit *60 Smithery *120 Spiritual Realm Spirit *82 Wang Ting raised his eyebrows. Smithery +1 +1 +1 +1 +1. Then, his blacksmith level seemingly, possibly, probably achieved a breakthrough accidentally. Blacksmith, 322 3000, Master Blacksmith. Wang Ting felt incredibly proud of himself now. He couldn't help but glance at the blacksmiths who were furiously wielding their muscular arms on the round pillars. Fortunately, he didn't look like that. He would go crazy otherwise. Besides smithery, there were many spiritual realm spirit attributes too. All the master-level characters experienced changes to their spirit. They were all in the spiritual realm. However, Wang Ting knew that not everyone who reached the spiritual realm spirit would have spiritual power. That depended on talent. It went without saying that he was a talented child. No one could deny that. Spirit, 721,000, Emperor Realm. Wang Ting looked at his spirit attribute. It was getting closer and closer to the peak of the Emperor Realm. His eyes shone. He was highly anticipating what the next realm would be. The figure who leaped down the round pillar walked over and said, "You're here." Master Opal, Gorlin, and the rune masters stepped forward and greeted him. "This lightning rod is completed. You can carve the runes on it soon." Master Opal was a dwarf. His hair and beard were plaited into multiple braids. He pointed to the round pillar in the lava as he spoke. Gorlin nodded and asked, "Who's willing to go?" "I'll do it." Master Carl replied instantly. Soon, the round pillar was lifted, bringing a huge splash of lava and flames with it. The body was entirely red, and it was burning hot. Carl rose into the air indifferently, unaffected by the heat. He took out a special rune pen and started carving on the pillar. Purple glow shone around the rune pen. Every time he moved it, a rune would be carved on the pillar. Master Carl was extremely careful. Hence, he slowly moved his pen stroke by stroke. The other pillars were finished one by one. They proceeded to the carving stage too. The rune masters kept themselves busy as they started carving. While they were working hard, attribute bubbles dropped from their bodies. Wang Ting picked everything up cheerfully. Rune knowledge * 36 spiritual realm spirit * 12 spiritual realm spirit * 8 rune knowledge * 25 rune knowledge * 30 Wang Teng's rune master level and his spiritual realm spirit were slowly increasing. Gorlin and the others didn't know that Wang Teng had reached the master level and his skills were better than some of the rune masters present. Hence, they didn't ask him to carve the runes personally. After all, much time was required to forge one lightning rod. No mistakes were allowed. In summary, they still thought Wang Teng was too young. Wang Teng didn't say anything. He was happy to be free. He didn't need to do anything and could still pick up attributes. How wonderful was that? Within a single day, 12 lightning rods were all completed, right on schedule. No accidents happened. It was hard for any accidents to happen, though, since the masters were there. Very soon, it was dinner time. Wang Teng and the other rune masters walked out of the underground smithery room. Yin Tongfang and Lord Yang were waiting for them. They asked anxiously, "How is it?" "Fortunately, we didn't disappoint you," Gorlin replied with a smile. Yin Tongfang heaved a huge sigh of relief. "That's great. The first step is successfully completed. This is a good start. You must be tired. Have your dinner quickly," Lord Yang reminded everyone. The next day, all the rune masters started carving the rest of the Thousand Thunder Annihilation Array in the Star Maple City. Gorlin split the city into different areas and assigned one to each rune master. Then, he said to Wang Teng, "I'll let you handle the Yi-Wood Melting Fire Array. Can you do that?" "Me?" Wang Teng had been in a relaxed state all this while, so when he suddenly heard his master passing the mission of creating the entire Yi-Wood Melting Fire Array to him, he was dumbstruck. The disciples of the rune masters had tagged along this time. They were also astounded. He was passing the Yi-Wood Melting Fire Array to Wang Teng. Master Gorlin was so biased towards his disciple. "Master Gorlin, isn't that a little inappropriate?" Master Karl and the other rune masters were hesitant. "It's all right. In the past, Wang Teng helped me complete the 8 Dragon Ablaze Dragon Array. The Yi-Wood Melting Fire Array is around the same difficulty level. I believe that he can do it," Gorlin replied. "He helped you to complete the 8 Dragon Ablaze Dragon Array." Everyone stared at Wang Teng in shock. They were all at the master level, but why was Gorlin's disciple so exceptionally outstanding? The younger generation of rune masters was stunned. Wang Teng's rune mastery had already reached that stage. Also, let's allow the disciples to participate. There won't be enough time for Wang Teng to complete the array alone, Gorlin added. Master Cha Shu smiled bitterly. "I'm afraid that they will mess up and waste this ingenious double array plan. We should give the young people some chances," Gorlin urged. "All right, let them try. We can clean up their mess anyway." Master Karl gritted his teeth. The rune master's disciples were excited. It would be a rare experience for them if they were able to complete the Yi-Wood Melting Fire Array. They thought that their masters wouldn't let them go easily, but they actually agreed in the end. However, the moment they remembered that they had to listen to Wang Teng's command, their gazes flickered, a competitive spirit rising in them. Chapter 443, An Emotionless Correcting Machine. Gorlin departed after he handed over the task to Wang Teng, leaving him with the younger generation of rune masters. Wang Teng looked at the arrogant and unyielding bunch of people in front of him and felt a headache. These people were all talented individuals since they were able to become master stage rune masters' disciples. They were obedient in front of their masters, but that didn't mean they would listen to Wang Teng. At this moment, everyone stood quietly at the same spot, waiting to see what Wang Teng would do. Wang Teng remained expressionless. He said in an indifferent tone, "I don't care what you're thinking, but since the masters asked me to take charge, you will have to listen to me." Everyone gave a look of disdain when they heard this. This fellow was daring. Who did he think he was to ask them to listen to him? "Those that are unwilling can step out," Wang Teng said. Ni Wenguang was unhappy. He wanted to say something, but another young man beside him pulled him back. The young man shook his head at him. Although the others were unconvinced, they didn't voice out. "What a pity. Wang Teng waited for a moment before shaking his head in disappointment. Everyone was speechless. Did he think they were stupid? Who couldn't tell that this was an obvious trap? Ni Wenguang's expression changed. He glared at Wang Teng furiously. He almost stepped out. This fellow was waiting for them to kick up a fuss. What an evil guy. Since there's no objection, you can start moving. Everyone will be in charge of a certain area. Start creating the Yi wood melting fire array now. Wang Teng glanced at everyone before continuing in an icy tone. The array is crucial. If anyone makes a mistake because of carelessness, I will kick you out of the team without any mercy. Everyone got nervous. How domineering. Wang Teng added, I'm a narrow-minded person. If you make things difficult for me, I'll do the same to you. I don't mind if you say I'm abusing my power to get even with you because that is the truth. But I wonder what your masters would think if they learned you got kicked out of the team. The rune masters' expressions changed. Wang Teng had hit their soft spot. These talented rune masters weren't afraid of anyone except their masters. If their masters knew that they were chased out of the team, they would go hard on them. Threat. This was a direct threat. This fellow was shameless. He didn't even blink when he said that he would abuse his power to get even on them. Why wasn't he going by the book? They were indignant and unconvinced, but they couldn't do anything to Wang Teng. Well, unless they left voluntarily. Obviously, no one wanted to give this chance up. Many of them frowned. Unknowingly, they seemed to have entered Wang Teng's trap. They felt exasperated under Wang Teng's cold and distant gaze. In the end, they had no choice but to start working obediently. They started creating the array under Wang Teng's lead. Seriously, this is a piece of cake. Wang Teng pouted. These talented rune masters just lacked a beating. After trampling them for some time, they would become obedient. He didn't act personally and used the young rune masters as manual labor. He pushed them hard. Be quick. Why are you so slow? Did you learn the basics properly? How can you call yourselves talent when you're so slow? When carving runes, you have to be stable and fast. Do you understand? Who is that? Ni Wenguang, right? Is your rune knowledge taught by a blacksmith? Anger appeared on the talented young rune master's face. He bellowed, Wang Teng, how dare you humiliate my master? Bullshit, when did I do that? I'm humiliating you, Wang Teng replied calmly. You, Ni Wenguang was so angry he wanted to vomit blood. This bastard was targeting him on purpose. The others felt like laughing, but they couldn't. If they did, it would encourage Wang Teng's arrogance. Their faces looked strange as they tried to suppress their laughter. But this fellow was a weird guy. What about me? Your 16th rune is wrong. This is such a simple thing. Why do you need me to remind you? Wang Teng pointed at his nose and scolded him. Nonsense, how can I be wrong? Ni Wenguang looked at his 16th rune instinctively. His expression changed, turning ugly. He did make a mistake. The others were astounded when they saw this scene. It looked like Ni Wenguang did make a mistake. The unfortunate thing was, Wang Teng saw it. This was embarrassing. Change it quickly. Are you waiting for me to teach you? Wang Teng glanced at him in contempt from the corner of his eyes. Ni Wenguang didn't say anything. The mistake made him unable to raise his head. He didn't have the confidence to speak further, so he looked down hastily and changed the rune. The atmosphere turned tense. The other rune masters became more cautious, but they were still too young. Also, this was their first time arranging a large-scale array, so it was normal to make mistakes. Who is that? The 7th rune below you. Wang Teng's voice was heard again. The person who got called froze for a moment. Then, he pondered and started correcting the rune silently. That one with a ponytail beside him. You look good, but your brain must be muddled. You made 3 mistakes. The 15th, 23rd, and 26th rune. Change it. Wang Teng sat cross-legged at the side. He opened a bag of chips he had bought on Earth and started eating it out of boredom. His voice would occasionally ring out. Everyone had been called, some even more than once. No one had the heart to laugh at other people anymore. After all, They were all the same. They had no right to laugh at others. At the same time, they were mind-blown. Wang Teng was scary. He seemed to have memorized all the runes and was able to point out everyone's mistakes. They even suspected that if he was asked to make the Yi wood melting fire array alone, he would be able to finish it without any difficulty. But how was that possible? He was at most an advanced stage rune master. How could he create such a large array? Yet, the truth was laid out in front of them. Wang Ting was even more outstanding than they expected. This was a huge stimulation to the talented young rune masters. They started questioning their lives, and there was no more competitiveness in them. Wang Ting kept pointing out their mistakes and urging them. All their efforts were used to tackle their tasks. They felt that he was even more strict and stern than their masters. This lad was an emotionless correcting machine, they complained in their hearts, a tinge of fear appearing in their eyes. This is so scary. They weren't from the same world. Was Wang Ting an old demon wearing the clothes of a young man? For the entire day, the young disciples lived in a nightmare. They felt the fear of being controlled by a correcting machine. But the result wasn't bad. They had completed more than a third of the array. Towards the end, the young rune masters hastened their pace and became more efficient after they got used to Wang Ting pressurizing them. As expected of talents. It looks like I can increase the pressure on them tomorrow. Wang Ting touched his chin and wondered to himself. Chapter 444. I can try. The young rune masters didn't hear Wang Ting's thoughts, but they unconsciously shuddered. They felt an evil aura engulfing them. They gathered together and started discussing in low voices, occasionally glancing at Wang Ting. It was obvious that they were talking about him. These talented young rune masters rarely had any interactions, but they were now bonded by a common hatred for a common enemy. Ni Wenguang, I think you shouldn't argue with him. Wang Ting is a devil. That's right. His rune mastery is at a frightening level. I can't imagine how he did it. I heard my master saying that Master Gorlin's rune mastery is higher than him. I didn't expect his disciple to be so powerful too. Like master, like disciple. Ni Wenguang, don't fight with him. You can't win. Ni Wenguang didn't feel good. He still didn't like Wang Ting, but he knew his limits. He honestly didn't plan to fight with Wang Ting anymore. He knew that he would just be bringing humiliation to himself if he did. Unfortunately, that bastard didn't want to let him go. He always reprimanded him. That was still all right. The infuriating thing was, his tone was worse compared to when he was speaking to the others. The other rune masters realized this too. They felt lucky that they didn't offend Wang Ting in the past. This person was truly narrow-minded. At this moment, Master Gorlin and the other masters dragged their exhausted bodies and walked over from afar. Master Carl immediately asked, "How's the formation of the Yi wood melting fire array?" Everyone replied honestly, "It's slightly more than a third completed." Are you kidding me? The master stage rune masters were all in disbelief. The young rune masters felt frustrated. They got tormented by Wang Ting and had put in so much effort to get this result. In the end, their masters suspected them. Master Carl's disciple was a goblin too. He was short, and his temper was just like his master's. He jumped up instantly and pointed at the area they had completed. "Master, if you don't believe us, you can inspect it yourself." Oh. The rune masters were surprised. These young fellows seemed confident. Were they telling the truth? However, this didn't make sense. The Yi wood melting fire array might not be as difficult as the Thousand Thunder Annihilation array, but it was a large-scale array too. These young lads completed more than a third of it in one day? It seemed impossible no matter how they looked at it. They walked over in confusion and amazement. The master stage rune masters observed the runes in that area. They got more and more astounded. Good riddance. They had really completed more than a third of it. Even more, there weren't any mistakes. The completion rate was extremely high. When did these brats become so incredible? You did, well. Master Shu complimented them. I told you to give the young men some chances. Gorlin stroked his beard and smiled. The other rune masters nodded in approval. They gave their disciples a look of satisfaction. The bitterness in the hearts of the young rune masters disappeared instantly. They puffed up their chest and felt exhilarated. It was as if they were finally able to hold up their heads. How did you do this? There isn't a single mistake at all, Master Carl asked curiously. The young rune masters fell silent. They turned and looked at Wang Ting in unplanned unison. Their masters were puzzled. They glanced at Wang Ting and asked, "Why are you all looking at him?" Master Carl's disciple gritted his teeth and explained what had happened to them. "I see." Cha Shu gave a forced smile. "I thought you had improved." "Chimph, I knew it. If these young lads were so powerful, I wouldn't be having a headache because of them." Master Carl glared at his disciple and scoffed. "Master, I worked hard too." Master Carl's disciple argued angrily. Just as the master and disciple were about to start quarreling, Master Cha Shu stopped them quickly and said to Gorlin, "Master Gorlin, you have groomed an outstanding disciple. We'll have to rely on him to take care of our good-for-nothing disciples for the rest of the array formation." "You're flattering him. Instead of taking care of them, Wang Teng can have some exchanges and mutual learning with your disciples," Gorlin replied humbly. "Yes, please don't worry. We'll have exchanges and mutual learning with one another," Wang Teng agreed. The rune masters immediately had a better impression of Wang Ting. They started throwing all kinds of praises and compliments at him. At this moment, Wang Teng became other people's kid again. The faces of the young rune masters were as black as the bottom of a pot, especially when they saw Wang Ting acting all humble and courteous. They gritted their teeth angrily. Hypocritical. Exchanges and mutual learning? Had he forgotten how he pressurized and humiliated them? Bastard. In the next 2 days, everyone made the best use of their time to create the 2 arrays. Things were going smoothly for the master stage rune masters. However, they went for quality, so the progress was a little slow. On the other hand, the speed on Wang Ting's side was astonishing. On the 3rd night, they had completed all the carvings of the runes for the Yi-Wood melting fire array. Everything was smooth, and there were no mistakes. Wang Teng didn't move his hands at all during the process. He just used his mouth. Of course, the young rune masters weren't weak, and their mastery wasn't low. If Wang Ting was given a bunch of beginner-stage rune masters, he wouldn't be able to rely solely on his mouth. The young rune masters finally acknowledged Wang Teng's ability. This fellow was irritating, but his skills were undeniable. They improved greatly after following Wang Ting for the past few days. One could say that they owed it to him. Currently, everyone was having a meeting in the meeting room. Yin Tongfang and the other martial warriors understood the situation and felt happy and worried at the same time. "Master Gorlin, can we speed up the formation of the Thousand Thunder Annihilation Array?" Lord Yang asked. "We're afraid that there will be mistakes if we pick up the pace." Before Gorlin could open his mouth, Master Cha Shu replied to him after some hesitation. "Indeed. We're in the crucial stage where we are carving the core of the array. If we hasten the process, I'm afraid, we might waste all our efforts." Gorlin gave a bitter smile. "Why don't we let Wang Ting join in?" Master Carl suddenly suggested. Everyone was shocked. They glanced at Master Carl before turning to look at Wang Ting. Wang Ting was stunned. He just completed the Yi-Wood melting fire array. Why were they throwing the Thousand Thunder Annihilation Array to him now? These people sure had high hopes for him. We all know who should get the credit for the completion of the Yi-Wood melting fire array. I feel that his mastery level is enough for him to make the Thousand Thunder Annihilation Array, Master Carl said. Gorlin contemplated for a second before asking, "Wang Ting, are you confident?" Everyone looked at him in anticipation. Wang Ting scanned the crowd, lamenting that he was born to be a workaholic. Then, he slowly nodded. "I can try." Chapter 445, A Huge Blow to Their Heart. "I can try." These 3 words gave no certainty, but when they saw Wang Ting's calm face, they chose to believe him. Even the master stage rune masters had great expectations for this young man. He had already used his actions to prove his ability. He had proposed the lightning fire double array and led the formation of the Yi-wood melting fire array. These two events were enough to prove his skills. In that case, well, allow Wang Teng to join the masters in completing the Thousand Thunder Annihilation array, Lord Yang concluded. Then, he said to Wang Teng, "Wang Teng, thanks for your hard work. You're being too polite." Wang Teng nodded. "I'll do my best." The young rune masters were stunned for a few seconds before revealing envy. This fellow got invited into the rune masters team and had the opportunity to work with them. They were from the same generation, but Wang Ting was already ahead of them. It was frustrating. "Master, what about us?" Ni Wengguang couldn't control himself and asked. The other young rune masters also stared at their masters hopefully. They wanted to join in too. Even if they were only there to observe, it was better than being rejected entirely. "You!" Master Dongguo glared at him in contempt. He snorted and replied, "Don't you know your limits?" The corners of their lips twitched, and their faces turned warm. Although Master Dongguo's response was merciless, it was the truth. They were honestly a little weak. Ni Wengguang turned green and white in anger and embarrassment. He turned and wanted to find someone to help him, but he realized that those idiots had already retracted their hopeful gazes and were looking at the ceiling nonchalantly. It was as if this had nothing to do with them. F***K. Ungrateful fellows. Ni Wengguang felt awkward, so he remained quiet. There was bitterness and resentment in his eyes. After the meeting ended, Wang Teng got dragged by the rune masters to discuss the arrangement of the next rune carving. After many rounds of discussions, they only had less than 2 days before the battle. The dark apparitions wouldn't attack them right on time. They must finish their preparations before that and give ample time for emergency responses. If they didn't, unpredictable changes might occur. Ni Wengguang and the other young rune masters watched Wang Ting getting pulled away right in front of them. On the other hand, no one cared about them. They stood on the spot and felt gloomy and forlorn. The rune masters only rested for 2 to 3 hours. They prepared to continue working at night. Wang Ting had no choice but to accompany the bunch of old people to work in the dark. It was miserable. They arrived at the southwest side of Star Maple City and divided the work. Then, they immediately started carving in the runes in this part of the city. The rune masters executed all their methods, resplendent glows shimmering in the night sky. Multiple runes appeared under their hands and got imprinted on the ground. Close to 20 rune masters worked at the same time. It was a rare scene. Wang Ting didn't waste time. He took a deep breath and turned grim. Then, he placed the rune pen on the ground and started twirling it around. The rune masters had their own tasks, but they still diverted a bit of attention to observe Wang Ting. When they saw Wang Ting's skilled moves and his stable posture, they knew that they were overthinking. There was no doubt of his impressiveness, and his ability was even more worth acknowledging. Gorlin smiled, feeling delighted and satisfied. With a disciple like Wang Teng, he managed to earn much respect and honor from the other rune masters. The next morning, everyone stopped what they were doing and sighed in relief. The rune masters looked at the progress of their own work before looking at their companions. They exchanged zones and proceeded with the last step, correction. Their method was exactly the same as how Wang Ting had guided the young rune masters. Even these master stage rune masters couldn't guarantee that they wouldn't make mistakes. Before the array was completed, there was still time for them to rectify the errors. If they waited until the array was finished, it would be too late. The array was a whole, and a single change would affect the entire thing. Any small mistakes could have unbearable consequences. The collapse of the array would cause a backlash to the rune masters who would host the array. Hence, they were extremely careful. After they rectified one another's mistakes, everyone came to the area where Wang Ting was at. A group of people gathered around him. Wang Ting. He was given key attention. He didn't know if he should laugh or cry. These masters didn't trust him at all. But he didn't mind. He would admit defeat if they were able to find any mistakes. The rune masters gathered here to inspect Wang Ting's carving with the intention of making up for his deficiencies. Yet, in the end, they realized something incredible. Their expressions turned grave. "This is..." Master Karl's eyes lit up. He praised, "The carving skills are exquisite. There are no mistakes at all. This is amazing. He has probably exceeded my level of mastery." Master Cha Shu exclaimed in surprise. He was flabbergasted. They complimented Wang Ting while carefully observing all the runes. In the end, they realized that there were no errors. This patch of runes was frighteningly perfect. A bunch of 100-year-old rune masters exchanged glances with one another in disbelief. They had lost their ability to speak for a moment. One word popped out in their minds. "Monster." "Wang Ting, what is your rune master level now?" Gorlin took a deep breath and asked. "I don't know. Master, I haven't done any tests." Wang Ting pretended to be oblivious. "Really?" Gorlin nodded. At this moment, Master Karl asked, "I saw that the runes you carved are perfect. Have you carved them before?" "Never. The Thousand Thunder Annihilation Array is terrifying. I won't have the chance to touch it normally." Wang Ting shook his head. Master Karl also knew that he had asked a stupid question, so he froze for a moment and shook his head. Seriously, he couldn't find any words to describe Wang Ting's result. "You did well, even better than us," Gorlin said with a bitter smile. He was much more straightforward than others. "Really? Master, don't scare me. I'm just trying my best to carve these runes properly." Wang Ting was delighted, but on the surface, he replied to his master in profound respect and humility. "Trying your best." Everyone smiled and shook their heads. He surpassed them just by trying his best. The master stage rune masters felt a huge blow to their hearts. He was being humble, but it sounded so infuriating when Wang Ting said it. "Your rune skills have improved greatly. I suspect that you have advanced to the master stage," Gorlin said sternly. "Master level? Master, are you sure?" Wang Ting asked in bewilderment. He looked at everyone's sincere expressions and immediately felt that his acting skills had improved. This was great. Chapter 446, Wang Ting, We Are Archenemies. Wang Ting felt that he was a pure person. The acting skills he displayed occasionally were to protect himself. His character didn't change. Gorlin and the other rune masters felt the same way too. This child didn't even know how outstanding he was. Look, he didn't know what level he was at. That showed his pure thinking. Gorlin wanted to reply to Wang Ting's question, but Master Karl was more impatient than him. "You must be at the master level. How can a normal rune master carve this perfect rune? Master Gorlin, you're a lucky fellow. You managed to find an extremely gifted disciple." He stared at Gorlin, green with envy. He wished that he could snatch Wang Ting away. He didn't care if he could teach Wang Ting. As long as he was his disciple, it would be a much-told tale. The master and the disciples were both at the master level. How amazing it sounded. Unfortunately, he belonged to other people. Gorlin coughed awkwardly. "Nothing is certain before the test. However, Master Karl, please don't look at me like this. I have no feelings towards you." "Fat." Wang Ting burst out laughing. He didn't expect his master to have this side to him. Also, the lethality of the words rose tremendously when spoken from the mouth of an elder with noble character and high prestige. The other rune masters laughed too. Master Karl's face turned black. He retorted, "You old monk, do you think I'm an old virgin like you? I have many grandchildren under me." Wang Ting's expression turned weird, as if he had heard something incredible. He carefully glanced at his master. A hint of frost appeared around Master Gorlin. He gritted his teeth and said, "Karl, I think you lack a beating." "I'm not afraid of you." Master Karl was a little scared, but he put on a calm front and snorted softly. All right, stop quarreling. You've gone off topic." The other rune masters suppressed their laughter and mediated the dispute. They worked throughout the night and went back to rest for 3 hours. At 8 a.m., they got up for breakfast. All through the night, the young rune masters were worried that they had lost the love from their masters. Hence, When they woke up and realized that their masters were all exceptionally enthusiastic towards Wang Teng, they felt even worse. They wanted to greet their masters, but no one cared about them. They were all gathered around Wang Teng as if he was their personal disciple. The young rune masters stood there in silent misery. What on earth was going on? In one night, they lost their master's love. They felt as helpless as an abandoned stray dog. They sat in a corner and ate their breakfasts. While eating, they kept stealing glances at the opposite table. All the rune masters were happily chatting with Wang Ting. The atmosphere was harmonious. They whispered to one another and gritted their teeth. Their resentment towards Wang Ting kept increasing. "Who's cursing me?" Wang Ting suddenly sneezed thrice. He was confused. After breakfast, the masters continued carving runes. They worked from dawn till night, and the day passed quickly. Finally, at 5 a.m. the next day, all the runes for the Thousand Thunder Annihilation Array were finished. A hint of sunrise gradually rose above the horizon. The sun sprinkled its light on the city. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief. The master stage rune masters glanced at one another and smiled. They might be more experienced, but they still felt a sense of satisfaction. The Thousand Thunder Annihilation Array was finally completed. All they had to do was wait for the dark apparitions to walk to their death. Wang Teng smiled gently. Then, he opened his mouth and said, "Masters, elders, the Thousand Thunder Annihilation Array is completed. There's nothing for me to do here. I have a mission, so we'll make a move first." "What? You still have a mission?" Master Carl exclaimed in surprise. "That's not right. It's too dangerous. You're the rising star in the rune world. You mustn't take risks." Master Shu shook his head furiously. The other rune masters agreed and persuaded him against leaving. After this cooperation, all the masters acknowledged Wang Ting's atrocious rune potential. They cherished him from the bottom of their hearts, so they were unwilling to let him take any risks. Wang Ting was caught between laughter and tears. He didn't expect this to happen. He was thankful for the rune master's love. However, besides being a rune master, he was also a martial warrior. He couldn't hide behind others like a turtle in its shell. "Elders, I'm thankful for your kind thoughts. However, I'm a martial warrior and am part of Earth's troop. You don't want me to be an army deserter, right?" Wang Teng said. "Don't worry. We'll speak to General Dan and persuade her not to let you on the battlefield." Master Carl patted his chest and promised confidently. "All right, Wang Teng has his own path. Let him make his own choices." Gorlin spoke up at this moment. Since Wang Ting's master had spoken, the others had no right to say anything. The persuasions at the tip of their lips never came out of their mouths. They sighed and shook their heads. "All right, young people like you do have to walk your own path," Master Carl said helplessly. "Thank you." Wang Teng bowed at them. Then, he looked at Gorlin and said, "Master, I'm leaving. Go ahead." Gorlin smiled. Wang Teng didn't say much. He rose into the air and turned into a ray of light as he soared through the sky and shot towards the horizon. "Gorlin, you will regret it if something happens to Wang Teng." Master Shu sighed. "I believe him," Gorlin replied with a smile. "I don't know where you get your confidence from. You have such a great disciple. If any mishaps happen, you will have no tears to cry." Carl scoffed. Gorlin smiled and remained silent. "Anyway, we're fortunate to have Wang Teng with us. If not, the last part of the carving wouldn't have gone so smoothly," Shu suddenly lamented. The other rune masters nodded, sighing emotionally. When Ni Wangguang and the other young men woke up, they realized that Wang Teng was gone. Once the irritating figure could no longer be seen beside their masters, they felt invigorated. They walked to their masters obediently and asked, "Master, where is that fellow?" "What fellow?" "Wang Ting." "Wang Ting is Wang Ting. Why are you calling him that fellow? Where are your manners? Look at Wang Ting, and then look at yourself. You're occupied with nothing, and your rune mastery is unbearable. How can you have the face to appear in front of me?" A bucket of cold water doused the happiness of the young rune masters. They welcomed the scoldings from their masters in a daze. What just happened? Why were they getting scolded? Wang Ting was already gone, so why was his shadow still lingering above them? The young rune masters were confused, feeling exasperated. The hatred towards that fellow shot right up. Wang Ting were arch-enemies from now on. Chapter 447. My dad hadn't agreed the Black Sparrow troop was stationed at the edge of the forest. For the past few days, Kong Li, Yuan Xian, and the other martial warriors waited for the commencement of the battle and cultivated relationships with their Gale Wolves. Only 1/3 of the 3 teams had Gale Wolves. Wang Teng's team was the only one where every member had a Gale Wolf. Kong Li and the others were envious but helpless. There was nothing they could do. When Wang Ting wasn't around, Ice Wind and Black Widow followed his orders and conducted the training, allowing the other team members to forge a close tie with their Gale Wolves quickly. These Gale Wolves were wild and hard to tame, but they didn't dare to make any trouble because Wang Ting had left some wisps of Wolf King rain behind. They could only cooperate obediently with the soldiers. Dan Taixian visited the camp today. She was surprised by the Gale Wolves' performances. How did he do it? She was puzzled. Although she had a wide range of experience, she still didn't know the reason behind it. Wang Ting said that he had killed the Wolf King, so the Gale Wolves listened to him. She didn't believe any of it. That young lad has many secrets. Dan Taixian smiled to herself. She was curious, but she didn't intend to probe further. There were many interesting things in the martial arts era. Everyone had their little secrets. While she was thinking, she suddenly raised her head and looked at the sky. He's back. Indeed, after a few moments, a figure flew down and landed in front of her. Master. Wang Ting greeted her. You're a busy person. Dan Taixian teased him. Sigh, your disciple is too outstanding. Without me, the array wouldn't have been completed in time. Wang Ting shook his head helplessly. I was just flattering you, but you started praising yourself. Dan Taixian rolled her eyes at him. Wang Ting chuckled. From your expression, there's nothing wrong with the array, right? Yes. Both arrays are done. You do have some skills in runes. Dan Taixian raised her eyebrows and sighed. They exchanged a few words before Wang Ting walked over to Kong Li and greeted her. Where have you been for the past few days? Kong Li asked him curiously. Star Maple City. As expected. The others shared the same thought when they looked at one another. They had overheard the conversation between Wang Ting and Dan Taixian just now, so they guessed the gist of it. However, since Wang Ting didn't go into details, they didn't ask either. After exchanging greetings, Wang Ting finally arrived in front of his team. Leader. Ice Wind and Black Widow saluted. You did well while I was away. Wang Ting complimented when he saw the state of his subordinates and the Gale Wolves. It's all thanks to your control over them. Without it, it would be hard to suppress these wolves, Ice Wind said, refusing to take the credit. The Gale Wolves howled in low tones as if agreeing with what Ice Wind said. Evil humans. They would have run away if it wasn't for fear of him taking revenge. Wang Ting smiled, looking at the Gale Wolves kindly. Sob. Immediately, all the Gale Wolves shuddered. They whined pitifully and laid on the ground, pretending to be dead. At night. The stars and moon hung high in the sky, and occasional insect chirps resounded in the forest around them. Besides that, there were no other noises. It was exceptionally quiet. Dan Taixian had blocked this entire zone. Any sounds they made in this area wouldn't spread to the other parts. Everyone sat in a circle with a bonfire burning in the middle. Wang Ting took out some star beast meat and barbecued it above the fire. He smiled and said, The dark apparitions are coming soon. The war might start tomorrow, so let me make dinner for you guys. I hope that everyone can have a good meal. Ice Wind and the other team members were elated. They had witnessed Wang Ting making a force dish before. That fragrance was lethally enticing. They were surprised when Wang Ting said he was cooking for them, but they were secretly anticipating it too. Is your food edible? Don't try to deceive us with some weird dishes. Kong Li glanced at him suspiciously from the corner of her eyes. Niu Li and Yuan Xian didn't believe him either. Yuan Xian even took out his dried food and started munching it. He scorned Wang Teng's cooking. Ice Wind and his teammates looked at Yuan Xian strangely. They wondered if Major Yuan would regret his actions after their leader finished cooking. "You don't have to eat it if you don't believe me," Wang Teng replied nonchalantly. "I only make food for those who trust me." "Mph, how conceited," Kong Li replied in disdain. Dan Taixian sat cross-legged on the crown of the big tree above them. She didn't participate in their interaction. Looking at the moon and listening to the laughter below, her gaze seemed sad and forlorn. After some time, her nose twitched. She smelled a strong fragrance. She looked down in surprise. At the same time, Kong Li had already forgotten what she had said. She stared at the golden piece of barbecued meat in Wang Ting's hand and pounced on it. She wanted to snatch it from him. Her saliva was already dripping down the edge of her lips. "Sigh, didn't you say that you won't eat my weird dishes?" Wang Ting dodged and teased her. "Give it to me." Kong Li was furious. She pursued him relentlessly. "This is a weird dish. You will die from eating it." Wang Teng ran around the crowd. The fragrance spread throughout the air, attracting everyone's gaze. While running, he took a huge bite of the meat and chewed it with gusto. He seemed to be savoring the dish. Kong Li was indignant. "Are you going to give it to me? If you don't, I will." "What will you do?" Wang Teng stopped and smiled at her. "I'll cry." After Kong Li finished her sentence, she pouted. She did seem to be on the verge of tears. Wang Ting. "You're so fake. You're an iron lady. Why are you acting all delicate? Everyone knows your character. What's the point of doing this? Don't put on a show in front of me. If you cry, I'll call you mom." Wang Tung snorted. "Phut, why would I want to be your mom? I'm so young. How can I have such an old child like you?" Kong Li rolled her eyes in anger. "My dad won't agree," Wang Teng replied calmly. "Ha ha ha." Niu Li and the others couldn't hold in their laughter anymore. "Amazing. Now you are making fun of me?" Kong Li roared in anger. Then, she started chasing Wang Teng again. "My master should have a taste first. There's no spot for you." Wang Teng arrived at the tree where Dan Taixian was at. He leaped and landed in front of Dan Taixian. As he passed the barbecued meat to her, he flattered her. "Master, I made this for you." Dan Taixian gave him an ambiguous smile and took a bite of the meat. Her eyes lit up at once. She exclaimed in shock, "Not bad, you've surpassed that fatty in school." "Of course. I put in much effort to make a good meal for you," Wang Teng replied seriously. "Mitch, there's no way I'll believe you." Dan Taixian rolled her eyes. Chapter 448. Kill all of them. No one had anything to say about Wang Ting giving the first piece of meat to Dan Taixian. After all, she was his master. Kong Li was exasperated. She glared at Wang Ting as if she wanted to skin him alive. The greatest distance in the world wasn't between the sky and the earth. It was when you had good food in front of you, but you couldn't eat it. This was extremely cruel for a foodie. Kong Li had experienced Wang Ting's narrow-mindedness. She felt a sense of helplessness floating up in her heart. Wang Ting knew that she was a food lover. He wanted to laugh when he saw her hopeless expression. He shook his head and said helplessly, "Don't worry. I'm making more meat. You will have your share." "You said it. You must fill up my stomach." Kong Li felt refreshed when she saw the meat turning golden in front of her. She rubbed her stomach. Can you have some ambition?" Wang Ting mocked her. Kong Li ignored him. She stared at the barbecued meat intently. Drips of golden fats fall into the flames and evaporate from the heat. Soon, another batch of fragrant meat was served fresh out of the flames. The skin was crispy, and the meat was tender. Slash. Kong Li was swift. She grabbed a piece of meat and stuffed it in her mouth directly without worrying about the heat. "Oh my God. Wang Teng, your cooking skills are amazing," she exclaimed in awe. The huge piece of meat entered her stomach without much chewing. "Now you know," Wang Ting said proudly. Kong Li gave him a thumbs up. She had no time to talk as she stuffed her mouth with meat again. Wang Ting. Wang Ting shook his head and distributed the rest of the barbecued meat. Yuan Xian kept his dried rations silently and calmly took over the piece of meat given by Niu Li. He ate it quietly. This was so delicious. There were many people, so Wang Ting barbecued 3 rounds of meat before everyone had the chance to have a taste of the force dish prepared by Force Chef Wang. Wang Ting looked at the satisfied expressions and felt that his efforts were worth it. Most people here never had the chance to eat a force dish prepared by a force chef master. Today, they finally got the opportunity, and it was free to boot. They were delighted. Wang Ting even took out the delicious wine he got from the dwarfs and had a few drinks with Kong Li and the others. You have many good things. After the war ends, you must take them out and share them with me. It can be the repayment for all the free meals I gave you. Kong Li burped in satisfaction. Wang Ting smiled without replying to her. If you can take it from me, I'll bow to you. They had their fill and extinguished the fire. Besides the glow from the moon and the stars, there was only darkness around them. Everyone was relaxed a moment ago, but they knew that after tonight, their life and death would be decreed by fate. They might not be able to enjoy the joy of life tomorrow. Waiting was torture. Coming events cast their shadows before them. Dark clouds enveloped the sky as if indicating the imminent arrival of a storm. The atmosphere was tense and depressing. Star Maple City. The entire city was frighteningly quiet. Time passed slowly as they waited. Yin Tongfang and Lord Yang stood on the roof of the Central Command building. They had been there since morning. They never left. At the edge of the forest, Dan Taixian stood on the crown of a huge tree with her hands behind her back. She watched Star Maple City from a distance quietly. She stood for the entire day. At the same, in many secluded spots around Star Maple City, numerous pairs of eyes were staring at Star Maple City in silence. Boom! An explosion suddenly resounded. They are here. These 2 words immediately appeared in everyone's mind, and they tensed up. A storm was brewing in the sky. An invisible force was churning and tumbling the thick and dark clouds. Giant whirlpools were formed in the air. There were as many as 5 whirlpools. They were scattered above Star Maple City like 5 huge devil eyeballs peeking from another world. 5-dimensional rift. Yin Tongfang and the people in Star Maple City turned grim as they stared at the 5 gigantic dimensional rifts in the sky. They were flabbergasted. Wang Ting saw this scene too. He muttered to himself gravely, "This is a large-scale attack." Beside him, Dan Taixian remained expressionless. She said coldly, "The human race will never have peace if the dark apparitions are still around." "Well, kill all of them then," Wang Ting replied unexpectedly. Dan Taixian was shocked for a moment. Then, she laughed like a maniac and said, "That's right, kill all of them." For some reason, Wang Ting started laughing too. They laughed like 2 mentally ill patients. Some distance away, Kong Li and the other martial warriors stared at the 2 of them in a daze. Were they mad? After a few seconds of laughing, Wang Ting stopped. He looked at the pitch-black holes that were widening continuously. He could almost see the numerous space attributes falling from the sky. He couldn't keep his excitement anymore, feeling restless. Before the dimensional rifts in the sky finished forming, a vibration came from the ground. In the distance, countless black figures rose from the ground. They surged towards Star Maple City from all directions like a tsunami. Roar! Howls that sounded like wild beasts resounded in the sky. The entire city seemed to be surrounded. There was nowhere to run. This was a painting of an apocalypse. When the dark apparitions were a few hundred meters away from the Star Maple City, Yin Tongfang took a deep breath and waved his hand. He commanded sternly, "Ignite!" Boom! 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 Rounds of explosions sounded abruptly. A large number of dark apparitions got hit by the explosives and burst into pieces. Black blood splattered everywhere. However, these low-level dark apparitions weren't afraid of death. They continued scurrying forward like an army of ants. The explosions continued, clearing a massive portion of the dark apparitions at the forefront. A fracture appeared in their formation. They blocked them. Kong Li felt a little relieved. This is just the first wave. Yuan Xian shook his head. I know. However, it means that our preparations aren't useless. Well, give the dark apparitions a good lesson this time, Kong Li replied. A good start would boost the morale of the soldiers significantly. I suddenly realized that bombing is an art. Wang Ting touched his chin and receded into deep thought. Kong Li and the others almost fainted. Was this the time to talk about art? Wait, what kind of art was bombing? What strange thoughts did this fellow have all the time? The second wave is coming, Niu Li suddenly said. Everyone looked at the city. Indeed, numerous dark apparitions were charging towards the city from the back. From afar, all one could see was a huge patch of black. Boom, boom, boom. Explosions sounded immediately on the walls of Star Maple City. Rune weapons were being used to destroy the dark apparitions on a large scale. Normally, these weapons were kept away in the military city. Today, they finally had the chance to bare their fangs. Some of these weapons were secretly transported over from other military cities over the past few days. As a result, there were enough weapons. After one round of attacks, the next batch would take over seamlessly. No chances were given to the dark apparitions. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.